Start. Good morning, everybody, members of the committee, staff, everybody watching us at home. Clerks has now confirmed that we have quorum, and so I'd like to call meeting 15 to order. This meeting is being held using the city's WebEx technology with members and staff connecting by video conference or calling in. Because we are meeting remotely, we ask for your patience with any delays and technical issues. Members of the public can observe the meeting on YouTube. The clerk's staff has connected all registered speakers to the meeting by audio. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Planning and Housing Committee page at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. I would like to request that staff keep their video turned off unless they need to speak or answer questions. This will make it easier for me as chair and for those watching on YouTube to observe members as they participate in the debate on each item and during votes. If there are any visiting members of council attending the meeting today, I would like to encourage you to turn on your video so that I know that you are present and can give you the opportunity to ask questions of staff and or speak. This will also assist the clerk staff in recording members' attendance for the minutes of this meeting. I also ask that all members and staff keep their microphones on mute unless you need to answer a question or speak. If any members wish to speak on an item, please make sure your video is on and you raise your hand or unmute your mic and indicate your intention to speak, and I will create a speakers list. When voting, I ask that members make sure that your video is turned on and raise your hands to indicate your vote. Members, I want to remind you that although members are participating remotely, you must still submit your motions in writing to the clerk. The clerk's staff are available by email at phc@toronto.ca. That's phc@toronto.ca to help you with any motions. Although we are in different locations and meeting remotely today, the committee would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you do have an interest, please raise your hand or unmute your mic and indicate the item number and the nature of the interest. Okay, I see none. Next, we need a motion to confirm the minutes of our last meeting on June 15, 2020, moved by Councillor Perks. All those in favor? Can I see those hands? Okay, that carries. Okay, let's proceed with the agenda review. So the first item on the agenda is PH 15.1, technical amendments to zoning bylaw 569/2013. There is a staff report with recommendations. Would anyone like to hold this item or move a motion to move it forward?
I'll move approval.
Okay, Councillor Perks moves approval. All those in favor? And that carries. Okay, item 15.2, temporary use zoning bylaw to expand permissions for outdoor patios for bars and restaurants. We have a supplementary report on this item that was posted on July 9th, but as you know, there was a MZO passed on this, so I do have a motion. Oh. Oh. Okay. We're going to have to come back because we're 1 minute early for this. So clerks does not want to jeopardize anything, so please bear with me. I'll come back to this item. So next item is 15.3, 1285, 1295, 1315, and 1325 Finch Avenue West and 30 Tangiers Road, zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision applications. We have a speaker registered on this item. Item 15.4, Toronto Local Appeal Body Chairs 2019 Annual Report. Would anybody like to hold this item? Councillor
Yes,
Christian Wong.
I'd like to hold that, please.
Councillor Wong
Councillor
Tam is
Fletcher.
holding the item. Thank you, Councillor. Item 15.5, Growing Up, Planning for Children in New Vertical Communities, Urban Design Guidelines, Final Recommendation Report. Would anyone like to hold this item?
I would, Madam Chair.
Okay.
It's Kristen Wong-Tam.
Yep, Councillor Wong Tam holds the item.
Madam Chair, I just wonder, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, because I was trying to hold that. I didn't think you didn't hear me earlier. Thank you.
Thank
I'll
you.
talk louder.
Item 15.6, Expanding Housing Options in Neighborhoods. We have a staff presentation on this item and speakers as well. And item 15.7, Toronto Building Requirements for Laneway Suites, Access for Firefighters. We have a speaker register on the item. 15.8, Authorizing the transfer of 123 Coxwell Avenue to Wood Green Community Housing. Would anyone like to hold this item?
I can move to adopt that.
Okay, Councillor Bradford moves for adoption. All those in favor?
Yep, and I just would like to quickly thank Accommodation Information Support for their work on that site, providing affordable housing for many years, since '94, and welcome Wood Green coming on board and taking over the site, and looking forward to working with them as well.
Sorry, I just have a question on that one about how many more units AIS has in the city. So you might just want to hold that, Councillor Bradford, if you don't mind, so I can get that answered.
Sure, yep, we can hold
you.
that.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 15.9, Regent Park Phase 3 Service Manager Consent to Transfer Block 1. Would anyone like to hold this item?
I would like to, Madam Chair. It's Councillor Wong-Tam.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. 15.10, City of Toronto, submission on Bill 184. We have speakers registered on this item.
Madam Chair, before you go too far on that one, if I could just alert you, when we get to that, I might have questions of the city solicitor.
Okay. Did clerks get that? Okay. Thank you, Councillor Perks. Item 15.11, creating new modular supportive housing at 11 Macy Avenue and 150 Harrison Street. Would anyone like to hold this item? No? Motion to move it forward? I can move that. All those in favor?
Would you like a recorded vote?
Sure. Recorded vote?
Okay. Yep.
All those in favor of adopting item PH 1511? Councillor Bradford?
In favor?
Councillor Perks?
In favor?
Councillor Fletcher?
In favor?
Councillor Bailao?
In favor?
Councillor McKelvey?
In favor?
Councillor Wong-Tam?
In favor?
That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, members. 15.12, creating new profit cooperative homes at 685 Queen Street East. Would anyone like to hold this item?
Hold.
Okay.
I'm holding that.
Yep. Councillor Fletcher?
Did you get that, Speaker?
I did.
Under
It's-
my name?
Yep.
Oh, thank you.
It's on hold
Thanks
for
so
you.
much. Thank you.
15.13, extension to reconvey social housing at 444 Logan Avenue to the city. Would anyone like to hold this item?
I'll just hold that for a minute.
Okay. Councillor Fletcher is holding that, and I believe that is it for our agenda. I would like to now go back, if you don't mind.
Speaker, Madam Chair, I'll just, 13 is fine. It's good.
13 is
I'm happy
fine,
to
we can
move
vote
that.
on it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Councillor Fletcher moves the item. All those in favor? That carries. Okay. And I would like to, if possible, put a motion forward just to have the speakers list closed at 10 a.m. so it gives a little bit more time if anybody is listening to us to register. And then we know what we'll be dealing with. So that speakers who have not pre-registered be allowed to still register until 10 o'clock, after which no further registration is allowed. Members of the committee okay with that? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. And if I could go back to item Item 2, and now we are okay to vote on the motion, which is just to receive the item for information. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. So first item on the agenda is 15.3, 1285, 1295, 1315, and 1325 Finch Avenue West and 30 Tangiers Road. We have speakers on this item, and is Jean Roy on the line already?
Yes, I'm here, Madam Chair.
Good morning, Jean. You have 5 minutes. Thanks for joining us today. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity today. I'm with the Canadian Fuels Association, and on behalf of our members, I'd like to provide you with some early comments regarding the proposal for the residential condo development at Finch and Tangiers, which is located southeast of the Keele-Finch intersection. And these comments today are in complement to the letters that we sent dated July the 8th, which you have under PH 15.3.2. The members of our associations are Shell Canada, Imperial Oil, known as ESSO as well, and Suncor Energy, which is Petro-Canada. They operate the 3 fuel storage and distribution terminals that are located in the northeast quadrant of the Keele-Finch employment area. I assume you have the visual in front of you. I can't see it, but I have provided a visual map. Can you confirm that you have the map?
I'm not sure if every member has the map, but they'll have access to your submission. Everybody has access to it.
On this map, it shows the location of fuel distribution terminals and also the location in relation to the terminals of the proposal for the condo development, which is located only approximately 100 meters away from the fuel terminal property line. You may or may not know this, but the fuel terminals are supplied directly by pipeline from the refineries in Sarnia, Nanticoke, and Montreal on an ongoing basis. This major energy infrastructure of these 3 terminals is by far the largest volume fuel storage distribution terminal industry complex in Canada. It is located there because it's strategically located in the middle of the Greater Toronto Area, and it provides approximately 95% of the liquid transportation fuels, gasoline, diesel, and other fuels used by business, government, public transit, private motorists, and it serves about 8 million people in the GTA and beyond. The fuel terminals, they also support the international airport with a reliable source of jet fuel. These terminals, they operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They handle a large quantity of highly flammable fuel and ship approximately 750 tractor tanker trucks per day in order to meet the needs of the Toronto area, the GTA, and Southern Ontario. If you have the slide, you can see that the terminal is located within a very large homogeneous employment area block, which is located east of the Keele Street employment area. And in the official plan, the fuel terminals are within the designated core employment area. The occupied land, which is zone employment heavy industrial. At the moment, no residential use exists east of the Keele Street today, and including on the proposed development site. And no residential use are permitted on the site with the existing zoning, which is zone industrial commercial at the moment. In our opinion, the introduction of sensitive land use, such as this proposed 14-story residential condo, which would contain 818 residential units, is in close proximity to the fuel terminal and is incompatible with the industrial operation of these terminals and likely of other industries in the close proximity. We're absolutely in agreement with the staff report, which states that there are aspects of the proposal that do not conform to land use permission and land use compatibility. So in conclusion, we are not opposed to the redevelopment of this site, but we are not in support of the current proposal. A future development at this site must be compatible with the significant employment area, which this site is a part of, and also with the various other adjacent industrial uses. We realize that our comments come very early in the process of this proposal, but we would rather make our concerns known now than later. And I thank you very much for your time. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker? Thank you. Thanks for joining us today, Jean. I think that's it. There's no questions, but thank you for your comments and deputation. Okay.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions of staff by any members of the committee? See, Councillor McKelvey?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to clarify with staff what is before us today. Like, this isn't a decision about zoning on the site or the building. This is just to look into this further. Can you just maybe speak to what the decision point is?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, the report before you is a preliminary report that sets out issues with the application that need to be resolved moving forward and to engage in community consultation. No decisions are being made at this point in time.
In the application from the proponent, do they acknowledge that they are an industrial area? Like, how do they propose to mitigate all of that?
There are policies in both the official plan and the Peel Fence secondary plan that speak to mitigation, and the applicant will have to address those policies moving forward. We'll be reviewing the application and how it addresses those policies as we continue to advance the application.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the report? Councillor Perks, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Next item, 15.4, Toronto Local Appeal Body Chairs 2019 Annual Report. There are no speakers on this item. Councillor Wong Tam held the item. Any questions of staff?
I have questions of staff.
Go ahead, Councillor Fletcher.
Is Mr. Haley there by any chance?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm on the line.
Good morning. I sent you an email asking, I'd just like to know if some of the documents I have in relation to a certain address, are those public or confidential?
Certainly the decision on any TLAB decision is public.
If you have commenced a review, is that public or not?
I would have to review that one through you, Madam Chair, on that specific address.
If you don't mind standing that down, please, because it's relevant, Mr. Lord. Some of the questions that I'm going to ask today for the annual report are related to specific circumstance. So, and what happens and how we get to these kind of places. So, I'm wondering, Madam Chair, if we should just stand that down while Mr. Hilly has a chance to look at that. If Mr. Lord has time for that today, it'd be great.
Sure. Is Mr. Haley okay with that?
Oh, he said he needed time.
I'm just wondering if today's enough time.
Yeah. It'll probably take about an hour.
Can you repeat that? I don't think we heard you.
It'll probably take me about an hour to look up the information that Councillor Fletcher is requesting.
Okay. Okay. We'll stand this down and come back at the end of the meeting. Okay,
I've sent you an email. I've sent Mr. Haley an email, so he could see it. Thanks.
thank you. Next item, 15.5, Growing Up, Planning for Children in New Vertical Communities, Urban Design Guidelines. It was held by Councillor Wong Tam. Are there any questions of staff?
Yes, Madam Speaker, and I apologize, I had to step away for 15.4. Are we coming back to that item?
Yes,
I had
yes, we're coming back to that.
Okay.
Councillor Fletcher has some questions that need some work, so we'll come back at the end of the meeting.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So with respect to 15.5, if I can, first question to staff is regarding the guideline status. If we were to assess putting forth guidelines that are discretionary and optional to be negotiated to the development sector, things that we're asking them for, how likely is it that we are going to achieve the objectives of what these guidelines are striving for?
Thank you, through the chair. We have had a number of meetings with the development industry, and we've seen through the monitoring of our own development pipeline that there is a culture shift happening right now in the provision of diversity of unit sizes in tall buildings. And we do think that making best efforts and working with the development industry, we can continue to improve all scales of development as they relate to providing high quality communities for families with children and larger households. We have integrated some policies in secondary plan as they have come forward.
And how would you measure that outcome?
I'm muted. No, wait.
The report speaks to an ongoing monitoring program, and there are some elements that we can do through quantitative means, through monitoring our development pipeline and through other sources of data to see to what degree we are seeing the increased diversity of unit types and sizes, and some is more qualitative. So we understand that as we go through the development process individually with each applicant, we take every opportunity to integrate childcare facilities, expanded public realm, et cetera, as indicated by the guidelines.
And is the intention to report back annually? Because regular report back, if you can be more specific around the frequency of report back, is it annual, and where will you be reporting? Where will this information be stored, and how can it be publicly accessible?
We see the potential to report back as that data becomes available. So we need to see cycles of development from buildings going through the application to full completion and construction. Potentially every 2 years, we may be able to collect all the relevant data, and I would say a report back will be something through the Planning and Housing Committee if requested.
And if you were
and on our website.
If the monitoring process revealed before our 2-year cycle, because it's not in the report, but if the monitoring process revealed that we are not seeing a shift in built form in programmatic structure of the building, what would be the intervention that planning would deploy in order to get to that outcome, which is children-friendly, family-friendly, vertical communities and neighborhoods?
Well, I think we can only know for sure when we undertake that monitoring process. But what I will say is we're supported by provincial legislation and our own official plan to bring this into force. So it's something that we can only know once we go through that monitoring process. Our initial monitoring has shown that we have increased the unit type, diversity of unit types dramatically since the guidelines were brought into draft and adopted by PHC and Council in 2017.
Is it just unit types that we're pursuing in terms of building age-friendly, family-friendly, vertical communities? And the random childcare or playground?
No, through the chair, we are looking at the entire range from the neighborhood, building, and unit that are spoken to through the guideline documents. Right now, the data we have enables us to actually reflect upon the unit diversity, and we know that there are other data sets that we can avail ourselves of that speak to the actual sizes of those units. That relates to the sizes set out in the Growing Up guidelines, and other elements we can track, such as the provision of community services and facilities at grade in new developments.
And my final question is with respect to school capacities, because we are seeing obviously 94% of new construction of residential is going to be in high-rise vertical communities. And we oftentimes see, sometimes, not oftentimes, but every now and then there's a sticker that's placed on the development review billboard that's placed in front of the application for rezoning, site for rezoning, that says you may not be able to get your child and or children into the school. How do you square that up? Because the application continues to go ahead. As far as I can tell, the buildings are approved, and there's this massive caveat that you may not be able to put your children in the local school. And even if the capacity of the school is full, and we're building, the school boards are building portables classrooms because they don't have enough classroom capacity. How do we ensure that we can, number one, allow those buildings if we are the ones who are providing those approvals, or it's the appeal body, but something is not lining up and the classrooms are getting fuller and the child-friendly facilities in the neighborhood are diminishing and not renewing quickly?
Through the chair, we are obviously also aware that school capacity is an issue, especially in our high growth areas. The Urban Design Guidelines document actually doesn't provide the commentary on the legislative structure that enables the Toronto District School Board to fund the reconstruction and expansion of local schools in high growth neighborhoods. But we do have a specific guideline relating to reimagining what the footprint and floor plate of urban schools can be using precedents, global precedents. And we understand that going forward that we need to be able to support the school board in looking at alternatives to the 1-2 floor grade related approach to schools, and provide some great examples of how they can be integrated vertically in vertical communities.
Thank you. Any other councillors with questions? No, seeing none. Speakers? Councillor Wong-Tam?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm sorry I didn't get to this a little bit earlier, but I would like to move a quick amendment to item number 3, so recommendation number 3, just at the very end. And I'm sorry, clerks, I was trying to get to this sooner, but I didn't. I was working on Bill 184. But if we can somehow put in there the language of frequency of report back, so therefore that the chief planner would report back as suggested by staff every 2 years. I think I would like to see a report back sooner, but if 2 years is enough time to allow for staff to receive the information, to clearly document it, that would be very helpful. And I think that's a fairly straightforward amendment. And just to my remarks, Madam Chair, I think in all the pre-application meetings I've had with city planning, and oftentimes the applicant, the very minimum what we ask for, especially in TYCC Community Council, is that there has to be a provision of at least minimum 10% of 3-bedroom units. But what we found is that it's actually not going far enough if that's all we're looking for. And I recognize that from the staff. They said that there were a number of things that they would be trying to achieve. But certainly it keeps coming back to the number of bedrooms and potentially the size of those units. But we don't really talk about, how are those amenities within the buildings going to be family friendly, because there's no playground facility that's being built inside those buildings. And sometimes when you have master communities of 2 or 3 towers on a single block, there's no provision of that oftentimes in those particular development applications. So everything is very much negotiated. Things that councillors have to push for, things that perhaps community members push for during the statutory public meetings. And if the community that comes out is predominantly older and perhaps without children, we're not really thinking about who are the future people moving into these neighborhoods and these buildings. And Madam Speaker, this is why if we are to build a downtown in Toronto or across the city, as we recognize that the shift of the built form is moving away from low-rise single-family or dual-family dwellings, but more into the vertical community format, then we're going to have to be much more strategic and intentional in how we want those communities to be planned. I think back to, even in Hong Kong, I was born there, and I recognize that just about everybody lives in a high-rise. There's not that many people that can actually afford a family dwelling on their own, sitting on a plot of land with a spacious front yard or backyard. Most of us at that point in time were living in vertical communities. And in the base of those buildings and the base of the grounds that comprise of those buildings is usually a school. There's usually some type of children play facility. There is a marketplace, and there are a whole host of other things that actually lend to family intergenerational living. These buildings that we're building in Toronto or that are being approved in Toronto and across Ontario are oftentimes standalone. They don't connect to other built form. They don't necessarily speak to a cohesive vision of how we're going to build a family-friendly vertical community. And so we're struggling, and COVID really put an extra highlight on the fact that families that were confined in their small apartments, maybe 2 or 3 bedrooms, that is a very difficult time that people had experienced. But I know many families who need 4 to 5 bedrooms because of intergenerational living, but also the fact that they've got more children. And we're not asking for 5-bedroom apartments. And yet what we're building is 94% of apartments in the city that are going to be high rise. So for those larger families, those intergenerational families, there's very little consideration for them. And I'm very mindful that that is something that we need to be much more strategic in pursuing. And the guidelines are such as this. It's a suggestion. The City of Toronto is suggesting to the development industry, we'd like you to do this. And then we go through this very polite negotiation of getting to those outcomes. And oftentimes developers would push back and say, we've given you the 10% 3-bedroom provision. You should be happy. That's enough. And we know in the long run of building a city that's going to be inclusive, that's going to be intergenerational, that's going to be family friendly, it's clearly not enough. So a more frequent reporting back cycle will let us take a look at what's working, whether our polite ask is being complied with. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Seeing none, can I move it as a package with Councillor Wong Tam's amendment to have it reported back every 2 years? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Next item, 15.6, expanding housing options in neighborhoods. We have a staff presentation. Is staff ready?
Oh. Hello, Madam Chair. Yes, I believe Clerks is running the slideshow. That's the one. Great. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, we can see it, Greg.
Yep,
go ahead.
All right, thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of Planning and Housing Committee.
Just a bit too loud.
A bit too loud. Okay.
Yeah.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of Planning and Housing Committee, members of the public, fellow staff. My name is Greg Ewens with the City Planning Division, and I'm here today on behalf of Greg Lintern to introduce and summarize the report before you, Expanding Housing Options in Neighborhoods. This report sets the stage for a conversation about our neighborhoods, where we've been and where we can go in the future. Slide, please. Slide. In 2019, City Planning was given direction by Council to report on approaches and a timeline to increase housing options in neighborhoods, to consult with registered community associations prior to submitting this report, to discuss opportunities for a missing middle pilot in Ward 19, and to plan for a public design competition. The report before this committee responds to that request. Slide. Slide, please. Oh, there we go. Missing middle is a term which has become increasingly present in conversations about how our city grows and changes. It refers to a range of housing from duplexes to low-rise walk-up apartments. We also consider accessory suites, laneway suites, garden suites among this continuum of housing. A variety of missing middle housing already exists in many areas across the city, but it is limited in where it can be newly built today. Slide, please. You're all familiar with this map. This is the city's land use map found in the official plan. It helps guide the growth of new housing, commercial space, employment. It also ensures the stability of other areas. The majority of growth and change in Toronto is anticipated to occur in about 1/4 of the city. The remaining 3/4 of the city is intended to experience little change over time. Slide, please. Here's a different representation of the land use map showing the percentage of land in the city covered by each designation. Slide, please. Now, the colors highlighted here reflect areas where we anticipate the majority of growth to occur: mixed use areas, employment areas, etc. Next slide, please. Now, these colors reflect areas where the plan anticipates limited growth or change over time. Our parks, our open spaces, apartment neighborhoods, and shown in yellow, the neighborhoods. Now, the neighborhoods are far and away the largest of the plan's land use designations by area. In neighborhoods, the plan contemplates primarily low-rise housing and intends that any new development reinforce the existing area character. Slide, please. The city is growing generally in areas where the plan intends that growth to occur, as you can see here. The downtown, the centers, our major streets, as shown on this map, which illustrates new residential development between the years of 2014 and 2018. It's worth noting the majority of residential growth that occurs and that's shown on this map occurs in the form of buildings over 5 stories. Slide, please. The city has several different zones that regulate what type of housing can be built in neighborhoods. These zones vary in terms of what type of buildings they permit. The R zone, for instance, shown here in brown on the map, is commonly found in neighborhoods in the old city boundaries, and it permits a range of dwelling types from single detached houses to 4-story apartment buildings. The RD zone, the residential detached zone, shown in yellow and applying to broad areas of the city, primarily those areas that were planned and built after World War II, permits only single detached houses. Other categories in the dwellings they permit are shown on the chart to the right. Slide, please. Approximately 47% of the city is zoned as one of these 5 residential zones, with the majority, approximately 70% of all residentially zoned areas being zoned RD, residential detached. As this zone only permits single detached houses, this leaves many communities with very limited options for new types of housing. Of note, secondary suites and such as basement apartments, and in some cases laneway suites, are the only other housing options currently allowed to be built in the RD zone under the current zoning. Slide, please. Now, change is, however, still happening in neighborhoods. Between 2011 and 2018, as shown on this map, permits were issued for just over 2,600 new units in neighborhoods. These are shown in blue, and over 7,000 rebuilds or renovations of existing dwellings. Those are shown in dark red. Now, one thing staff looked at in reviewing this data was the density performance of different zones, or how many residential units you may expect in a given area based on what it is zoned. In general, more permissive zones had higher net population densities. The R and the RT zones are about 3 times as dense as the residential detached zone and approaching transit supportive density. The RM zone is around 2 times as dense. Now, this and the preceding maps are a high-level snapshot that starts to explain the limited physical change that has occurred in neighborhoods, the city's neighborhoods over time. What these maps don't clearly illustrate, however, is the socioeconomic changes that have occurred to varying degrees in neighborhoods across the city. As part of our work, it will be important to critically examine the relationships between planning permissions and the growing social and economic polarization in Toronto neighborhoods. Slide, please. among the core questions our work looks to answer is how will change in the city's neighborhoods respond to the diverse housing, mobility, climate, and equity challenges at the center of Toronto's next decade of growth and beyond? How do we enhance local character, resiliency, sustainability, and provide more housing options that support the ability for people to live and work locally? Importantly, as part of this work, we must also engage in a conversation about the biases inherent in the history of physical planning that have taken us to where we are today. We will consult on these questions and develop recommendations to expand housing options in neighborhoods. In informing this report, these conversations have already begun. Slide, please. Conversations in preparing this report and our work program have included the Planning Review Panel, a door-to-door consultation in Ward 19, and outreach to registered community associations. With these groups, we consulted on perceived benefits and challenges related to adding more housing in neighborhoods, as well as their preferences related to the form and location of new housing types. Now, the report details the responses of these groups and the variety of opinions expressed through this initial outreach. Going forward, we will continue to engage with these groups, and it is critical that our conversations on this topic be broad and inclusive. Slide, please. And slide. The work plan detailed in the report includes a variety of initiatives categorized as follows: engage, enable, facilitate, study, pilot, and monitor. Slide, please. All facets of this work program are structured into these 6 categories. The work plan intends that we engage in broad, meaningful, and inclusive public dialogue through a variety of forms of outreach, including design workshops. We will look to enable new permissions for housing options such as coach houses, increase housing on neighborhood major streets, and allow additional units within currently permitted building forms. We can facilitate the creation of missing middle housing where it's already permitted by debugging existing zoning standards, looking at financial and process barriers, and looking at what tools as a municipality we have to encourage our preferred housing outcomes. There is a need to undertake study of potential policies and programs, resiliency strategies, infrastructure and parking review to inform our consultation, our planning, and our policy goals. We can pilot missing middle housing to test outcomes on a smaller scale and on a shorter timeline. And finally, we will monitor the results of this work to determine desired outcomes, establish metrics. These will be refined through public engagement to provide clear information about how we're doing, where to course correct as necessary. Slide, please. The forecasted short, medium, and long-term timelines for each piece of work under those 6 categories is shown on this slide. A number of pieces of work occur within the short to 6 to 9 months, medium term, 9 to 18-month timeframes. This is an ambitious work plan with ambitious timelines. Advancing this work as a priority will be a challenge given all of our other priorities, and choices will have to be made. We will be striking a team to move this work forward. Slide, please. Before I conclude, on behalf of Greg Lintern, I'd just like to thank the many staff in the many roles researching, writing, consulting, listening, involved in putting together this report. In recent years, the city has pushed forward on a range of initiatives to broaden and safeguard our housing supply, from secondary suites to laneway suites to inclusionary zoning and dwelling room protections. Exploring further ways to increase housing options is the next phase in this continuum of work. What lies ahead is research and analysis about where and how we could do this. And the reasons why we're doing this work could not be more important: to create a better, more equitable, more resilient city. Robust engagement with those who live in neighborhoods now and those who would like to live there is essential to advancing this work. Realizing more potential housing options is the direction we are recommending we head in. This is a departure from our current policy that tilts toward less change. We are now saying that maintaining the general scale of neighborhoods and accommodating gentle density are both possible. Toronto's housing challenges are complex and pressing. A multifaceted approach is required, and the adaptability and responsiveness of local government and residents will play a considerable role in our shared success. This initiative represents a generational opportunity to reimagine and evolve Toronto's extensive low-rise neighborhoods. as more inclusive places for existing and future residents to call home. Slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. We'll now proceed to speakers, and then we'll go back to questions of staff. So the first speaker on this item is Jeff Cattell. Jeff, are you there? Morning, Jeff. Jeff, we can't hear you. Jeff? You might be on mute. Can you unmute yourself? Good morning, Jeff. Are you there?
You should call in again.
Jeff? Okay, I think we're having some technical difficulties, Jeff. I'm going to go to the next speaker, and maybe you can hang up and try calling back again to see if we have a better connection. I'll come back to you. So the next speaker is Kathy McDonald. Kathy,
Kathy McDonald here.
Good morning, Kathy.
I wanted to speak before Jeff, and so this is fine. Hopefully Jeff's connection can get sorted out. So we are the co-chairs of the Federation of North Toronto Residents Association, and we represent over 30 residents associations in the area between Bloor, Shepherd, Bathurst, and the Don Valley. Our area includes the older neighborhoods, the post-war suburbs, and planned communities. So we note that new development in all our neighborhoods has been replacing single-family houses with even larger and more expensive houses, and that the development is not always in character with the existing neighborhood. We also notice that even in the areas where the zoning does permit the wide range of typologies that the Yellow Belt Initiative is promoting, none of this is actually happening. All we're getting is larger single-family houses. Our area also includes the high-density Yonge and Eglinton area, where our members struggle to help make this community livable. We see that intensification has to be happening across the city and not in so highly focused high-density areas. Fontra strongly supports the Yellow Belt Initiative and the recommendations in the report. Both Jeff and I participated in the City Urban Land Institute and Ryerson studies that helped prepare for this report that we're talking about today. We see the work program as the beginning of really important changes to our city, and we want to continue to be involved in helping with this. Fontra's priorities in the work program are first to highlight the need for the development of intensification to take place in the context of building complete communities, ones that have good transit, local shopping, etc., and deal with the post-COVID concerns and meeting climate change initiatives. That this provides the framework for thinking about how we change the city. We also agree that intensification in neighborhoods needs to be compatible with them, and that area character is important and should be respected. We don't see that this intensification and area character are incompatible objectives. We note that the recent work plan for heritage studies in the city includes looking at the character of various parts of the city. We know that updated official plan and zoning policies will have to be established, and stress that these have to be supported by design guidelines, or that the development permit bylaw program be established for this program. We want to ensure that residents have a strong voice in the development of their neighborhoods. They know what works and what the opportunities are. We suggest that there could be working groups to develop neighborhood strategies. And we also stress the need for improvements to Committee of Adjustment and TLAB processes so that residents can have stronger voices in the changes to their community.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap
We
up.
also note that, I just had one comment. We also note that there are many other kinds of changes that are needed. We see, given our observation about the fact that typology, the additional typologies are allowed in many of our neighborhoods but aren't built. What's causing that problem? What are the financial issues? What kinds of other kinds of changes need to be made? That's my comments for today.
Thank you, Kathy. Any questions? Seeing none, thanks for joining us today, Kathy. Thanks for your deputation.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to see if Jeff has a better connection now. Jeff Cattell? Jeff, I've been asked to tell you that it is better if you call in the number that you've received instead of using your computer. It seems like you're having some difficulties and we can't understand, you're not coming through. So if you could call back with the number just on the phone, I'll try you back after the next speaker once again. Next we have Christine Mercado. Christine, are you there? Good morning, Christine. Good morning, Christine. You have been unmuted, so Christine? Okay, it seems like we can't be in contact with Christine. Judy Gibson? Judy, are you there?
Hello.
Is this Judy?
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yep. Is this
No,
Judy?
This is Christine Mercado.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, Christine.
Okay.
Glad
Hi.
we've been able to
so
connect.
I've been having the same problems that Jeff is, actually.
Okay, Christine, sorry about that. Just bear with us.
Okay, no worries. Can you just speak up a little bit, because you're quite quiet.
Okay, go ahead,
I'm actually
Christine.
having a hard
You
time
have
hearing
5
you.
minutes. You can start.
Okay, for sure. Now, before we can begin the 5 minutes, can staff please pull up map 2, page 26 of the planning and housing? That will be attachment 1. Is that possible?
Say that again?
I'm asking if the staff can please pull up map 2, page 26 of attachment 1.
Yeah, we're not displaying anything, so if you can proceed with your deputation, that'd be great.
Okay, my name is Christine Mercado, and I'm the chair of the Long Branch Neighborhood Association. Long Branch was incorporated 136 years ago and is an example of a complete neighborhood. It addresses missing middle housing through zoning and site area specific plans, and our diverse population is growing. We have showcased Long Branch during this study as demonstrating all the housing types surveyed, which also accommodate diverse income levels. And the 2016 census reports rental and home ownership is measured at 50-50 split in our neighborhood. There is a growth plan that is being implemented through developing site area specific plans and along the avenue. If we could really complain about anything, 75% of our avenue remains underdeveloped. So to us, addressing growth on the avenue should be a priority for Long Branch, not trying to solve a problem that we don't have. This is why we strongly urge this committee not to adopt Part 3A of this motion and to direct planning to examine the need to expand housing on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. We support the concept proposed in the action steps of pilot, test, and monitor. We have firsthand experience of this process for over the last 2 years and realize that important learning should be evaluated to improve the initiatives of the city and optimize them for all stakeholders. And we have 2 examples of this, the Long Branch Neighborhood Character Guidelines and the motion put forth to strengthen tree protection bylaws. Review of the guidelines is pending. It was delayed due to COVID-19, but once completed, will reveal important learnings for this initiative and opportunities to improve. The city has not really yet evaluated their success. As a second example, the city has declared a climate emergency. So we have flagged the need for stronger tree protection bylaws to maintain the tree canopy levels and achieve the city goal of growing the canopy to 40%. If you want item 3 and this bylaw to work together, we can't expand housing choices at the expense of existing green infrastructure, old growth forests, and mature trees. So those need to be preserved for health and enjoyment of current and future residents. We see little mention of the annual bulletin adopted by this committee in July 2019, How Does the City Grow? There's no mention that Toronto has already exceeded the housing target, as the latest figure being 137% to accommodate the forecasted growth for 2041. So knowing this, I think that there is a disconnect between that report and the report in front of this committee today that needs to be addressed. Now, if this change is necessary, and we recognize that the survey indicates significant interest in this change in some neighborhoods, it needs to start where the greatest opportunities are, and with the biggest lot frontages. For example, 18 meters. And this is the minimum lot frontage for a triplex in Long Branch. City Council should direct staff to determine priority neighborhoods to loosen permissions where missing middle housing is based on declining populations, declining school enrollments, and excess existing infrastructure such as libraries, community centers, and access to subways. And this opportunity was identified in the report on page 29. You should really start there. This initiative needs to take into account and work hand in hand with other excellent policies that exist, such as Every Tree Counts and the Long Branch Character Guidelines. These documents and others like it preserve neighborhood character and address environmental policies of the official plan. These are the precision documents that help shape neighborhoods. So with this in mind, we would make the following recommendations. We would modify number 3 in this motion to acknowledge that one size does not fit all for expanding housing options. This approach needs to look at existing infrastructure capacity on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis before simply creating broad generic zoning to accommodate the missing middle housing component in all RD zones. We would also ask that you analyze And the wording would be analyze upfront the existing growth plans within neighborhoods and where existing infrastructure exists and can accommodate more, such as areas with undercapacity schools or underutilized facilities, then proceed with the action steps outlined, but not make wholesale changes to all neighborhoods in Toronto. Number two, we would add in an additional action step over the next 6 to 18 months to learn from the implementation of previous initiatives and pilots, such as growth along the avenues, laneway suites, secondary suites, and the character guidelines. Number three, we would ask that you integrate this initiative with other critical goals, given the city has declared a climate emergency. So, and think about how could this move forward within the context of growing the tree canopy to 40% and increasing permeable surfaces. The city has to acknowledge its own research supports that the fact that without preserving mature trees on private land and protecting plantable space, this 40% goal is unattainable. And lastly, our fourth recommendation is to ensure that extensive community consultation takes place throughout all stages of this initiative.
Thank you, Christine.
So the LDNA will.
Thank you. I need you to wrap up. You're over your 5 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you very much for letting us participate in this program, and we hope to participate more.
Thank you, Christine. Thanks for joining us. Any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, thanks for joining us today. Is Jeff back on the line? Hi, Jeff. Good morning. Nope. No, we cannot hear you. We'll go with Ronald Jameson. Ronald, are you there? Good morning. Okay, let's try Sarah Neville. Good morning, Sarah.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi there. I'm speaking on behalf of myself as well as my co-property owners, Robert Dodds, Harold Walling, and Chasson La Victoire. We are property owners in Ward 9, which is Councillor Belau's ward, of course. I'm calling in regarding this property and about the parks levy fee and the application to properties such as ours. We purchased this property, 31 Rachon Park Crescent, in 2019. The property was zoned R as a single-family dwelling. When we purchased the home, it had been subdivided and used as 3 separate units, likely for many years, if not many decades. And we bought the property with the understanding that we could use it as 3 units. Hal and Chasson would be living in one of the units and we would be renting the other 2. In the spring, we had an inspector in who informed us that the units were not compliant and that we were only zoned as single family, and we were issued an order to comply to bring the units into compliance and or return the home to single family dwelling status. So we've spent the last year bringing the property into compliance, and we have gone through many, many steps to do so, including working closely with the building department, with our building inspector, Chris Grimaldi. We've hired lawyers to help us navigate the process. We've worked with a BCIN consultant and our local councillor's office, Councillor Belau's office, as well as all the relevant departments at City Hall. So we have spent an enormous amount of time and many, many tens of thousands of dollars, probably approaching $100,000 at this point in terms of the cost of bringing the property into compliance. And we have done so in good faith and with every intention to meet the requirements of the City of Toronto. We recently applied for and received a minor variance, which will now allow us to rent the units legally as 2 secondary suites. So we were overjoyed to receive that permission. However, what we learned about a year ago, last August, was that in applying for a secondary suite, this would trigger a parks levy fee, which in our case will be in the amount of approximately $30,000. So we were devastated to learn this. We had already tapped most of our resources to go through all the steps that I have outlined. And we did not know, and we still do not know, how we will pay that fee. My understanding of the parks levy fee is that it exists to offset densification of developers to increase parklands in the City of Toronto. That parks levy fee does not seem to be applicable or relevant in the cases such as ours, which are gentle densification, in this case by the addition of 2 rental units, and furthermore by the fact that our units were pre-existing and, as I said, have been for many years. So this kind of fee, development fees, and in our case, the parks levy fee, is an enormous barrier to legalization and increase of housing in our neighborhood. It puts the prospect of legalizing the 2 rental units out of reach, and if the fees are not waived, which is what we are hoping Council will vote to approve, we will have to consider merging the 2 units to avoid having to pay this fee. So this will mean not only the loss of one of the rental units, but it will mean in our case that we will have to evict the existing tenants so that we can conduct the appropriate renovations. So as per the Toronto Consultation Summary Report of 2019, increasing the density of the so-called yellow belt is a priority that's been expressed in many consultations. And it's noted that single-family detached homes and condos, skyscrapers are overrepresented, and there is not enough of the kinds of housing that we are trying to create here, which is duplexes and triplexes and secondary suites, etc. So, what we are asking is that the City of Toronto waive park levy fees. As I said, they do not. This does not seem to be the purpose of the parkland dedication. We are, of course, not in a position to offer parkland to the City of Toronto, and it does not seem to be appropriate in our case. So we hope that the committee will recommend that park levy fees are waived for cases such as ours. And as soon as possible, the financial burden on us has been considerable already. And every month that passes, we continue to lose rental income and are carrying a significant financial burden. And I know that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of cases such as ours around the City of Toronto. So we hope that you will make that recommendation to waive those fees as soon as possible, and ideally before the end of the year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, thanks for joining us, Sarah. Sarah, I just want to make sure that I got you correctly. So Bob, Hall, and Cassandra, they're not joining us, right? You're speaking on behalf of everybody?
I'm speaking. Bob is here with me right now, but the other 2 are not able to join today, so I'm speaking on behalf of all 4.
Great.
So you've cut a few speakers from your list there.
Okay. Okay, Sarah, thanks for joining us today. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try to get Ronald on. Ronald Jameson, can you hear us? Good morning, Ronald. Are you there? Ronald? Okay, it seems like we can't get Ronald through. Let's try Jeff Cattell one last time. Good morning, Jeff. Jeff? Good morning. Jeff, are you there? I'm sorry, we're having the same issues. We really can't hear you. Okay. And that concludes the speakers list. I'm truly sorry for the members that weren't able to get in. If you want to send anything to all members of the committee, we'll be able to review anything that you might want to send. And you can send it to clerks still today, and you'll be posted on the website. Okay, so that concludes the speakers list. I know that Councillor Fletcher had already sent me a message saying she had questions, but she's on the phone. So are there any other councillors that have questions of staff? Questions of staff? No? Just Councillor Fletcher? Okay, Councillor Fletcher? Okay, she's on the phone. Are there any other councillors that have questions of staff? No? Okay. I'll ask a few, just see, I give some time to Councillor Fletcher to see if she gets off the phone, because I know that she had questions of staff. To staff, with regards to the last deputations, I know that one of the things that you're looking at is the financial impact on how we can have homeowners bring some of these units online. Is that work include development charges, park fees, all the charges, permit fees? Are you looking at all that to see what is the effect, and then how, if and how you can tackle this issue?
Through the chair, yes, as part of this work, we'll be working with staff and corporate finance to look at ways in which adjustments can be made to the current fee structure for missing middle housing regarding development charges in other areas.
Okay. And you didn't put up the slide. I'm not sure if you have it, but when we're looking into many of these neighborhoods in the Yellow Belt, is it true that a lot of them, when you take the development that is happening in these centers, have actually had population decreases?
That may be better answered by my colleague Michael Wright, if he's on the phone, or Mike Mizzi here as well, if either of them want to weigh in on that point.
To you, Madam Chair. Yes, there has definitely been debate last census. Some parts of the city have absolutely experienced a decrease in population, some a significant increase. Overall, the city continues to grow significantly, but there are definitely some neighborhoods, in particular in the outer three districts, that have declined, and they are primarily in areas where it's the residential detached zoning areas.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Councillor Perks, you have questions of staff?
I'm not sure who to ask this of. When we reduce the amount of money that we collect in parks levies or development charges, what is the impact on the City of Toronto?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think it's to determine what the impact might be. I believe it's a bit early to make any comment about what that may be, as we don't yet know what changes we're making, if any, to the fee structure. It is something we're going to look into, and as part of looking into that, that work will have to be accompanied by an understanding of what the impacts would be to the city's finances.
So maybe I can ask this a different way. What do those monies pay for?
Well, what is being collected, whether it's parks levies going to improvement of parks, acquisition of park space, development charges going to a whole range of services that the city delivers, building permit fees collected to recover the cost of reviewing building permit applications, staff time. There are a number of things that these fees go to, and determining what impacts on those services, if there is any change to those fees, would be part of our analysis.
So to follow up on that, let's leave aside the cost recovery building fees, but the other ones you mentioned, I've seen a number of reports from the planning department outlining that One of the areas where the city needs to do better is to provide the infrastructure, services, open green space necessary to accommodate more development. If we don't collect those fees, we're going to have a harder time, not an easier time, of providing those services, infrastructure, and green spaces. Correct?
It's possible. The conversation that we have with corporate finance may involve other options to provide funding to those areas, rebalancing of development charges. As I said, it's too early to determine the impacts and really what the resolutions would be if there are impacts on areas of green space and infrastructure, as you suggest.
So I think part of what you said to me, and I just want to check this, is there is no free lunch. If we want to provide green space, infrastructure, and services to new residents in the City of Toronto, somebody has to pay for it.
Yes, these services have a cost.
Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher? Councillor Fletcher, you had questions on this item? Councillor Fletcher?
Hi, I do have questions on this item. Can I be a little specific about an area? And I'm really looking at how quickly this could happen on arterials that somehow just have a neighborhood designation. Do you know how many arterials there are that contain a neighborhood designation?
I could perhaps comment on that. We have several hundred kilometers of street frontage that are on what we call or are labeled major streets. So
how are you defining a major street? Just tell me, please.
So they are defined by generally right-of-way width. They're shown on the map in both the zoning bylaw. They're different than the avenues which go under special study. But a lot of these major streets, and it's one of the areas of study, if you think of a street like Islington, where almost half its length has some form of single detached or low scale housing, yet it has a significant right of way, and it carries a lot of bus traffic into the Islington subway station. It's the kind of street that would be a prime example of where we will look at the zoning that fronts on these major streets for opportunities to perhaps deal with gentle intensification or change to the zoning.
So transit is a factor, then?
Well, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have a great many of these major streets are in fact the main bus routes that feed into the subway stations, yet a lot of them have a density and a zone category that's a relatively low number.
So we're not really looking at this on just straight up residential street. You're really looking at transit, right-of-way width, nature of the street.
When we, in particular to the part of the work plan that refers to major street zoning, that is actually on the streets that are identified as major streets in our bylaw.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that last piece.
Major streets are identified, and they are the Islingtons and Kiplings of the world. They're not streets that generally go into the neighborhood. So that one aspect of our study work plan will look at those major streets.
So I do have a section on Gerrard Street that's still zoned as a neighborhood, while the rest of it is zoned MCR or for greater density, fitting in as an avenue. And it's quite frustrating because, anyway, I'll speak about that in a minute. But what will the requirement be for affordable housing with this upzoning? Well, how are you writing that in your work plan? And this is generous then, going to be generous. How do we get the generosity paid back in affordable housing, or is that part something you're looking at yet?
Well, at this, so far we have not commenced the work specific to the major street zoning, but I mean, obviously we'll look into that. That's probably a part of the formula and an important piece of it, But at this stage, we haven't even commenced that major street zoning work.
When do you expect to do that?
Well, as part of the work plan, we go forward from today, as you can see on that bar, the chart on, I think it was slide 17, that yellow table. We move forward from this and start on a whole bunch of different initiatives that come out of this missing middle work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Any other councillors with questions of staff? Seeing none, speakers? Anybody that would like to speak on this item? Councillor Bradford.
Thanks very much, Madam Speaker. I have a motion that I'd like to move, and we just put that on the screen. It's just requesting something I worked on with staff here to prepare a pilot project, implementation project in Ward 19, no later than Q4 2020, to achieve the objectives outlined in the report. The report speaks to a potential pilot in Ward 19 based on the original motion last summer, and this is just continuing to direct that work to advance with a specific timeline. This is something, the conversation about missing middle, and I appreciate the presentation from Greg Ewins. It's something that the housing community and the planning community has been calling for in the city of Toronto for a number of years now. We're seeing those conversations happen across North America because, you know, for the most part, much of the planning thinking in a North American context has been very similar over the past number of decades, really since the 1950s. And this report is showing the city's commitment to expanding housing options and changing the way that we've traditionally done things here. So with that, I would like to thank our Chief Planner, Greg Lintern, Michael Mitzi, Lorna Day, Danny Sad, Chris Hilbrecht, for all of their extensive work in getting us to the roadmap that we have in front of us right now. I think that we're seeing something that is incremental, but ultimately a positive progression on the housing file and the change that we need in our planning and housing system right now in the city today. That's important. That's important work, because if you go back and look at our consolidated official plan, if you go back to 2003, the city actually looked a lot different. And that OP that we are, you know, constantly updating and working from, that thinking was quite a bit different than it might be today. And like all areas of policy, things need to change, they need to evolve, and our policies and our processes need to evolve too. They need to reflect the changes, the challenges that we are seeing in our housing market today, the challenges that we're having with affordability, the challenges that we're having with rental, with stock, with supply. All of those things are different today than they were in 2003. And this is important work that moves us in that direction. You know, I think we've heard about some of the challenges. There's certainly things that are going to need to be worked through. But just because that's hard work, it doesn't excuse us for doing it. And I think we're seeing that commitment from staff certainly today. And I think that that's important. So staff have charted the course, and it's going to ultimately be up for council to choose the path, as we do on so many other files. And I think it's important for us to push forward with that quickly and ambitiously, recognizing the challenges and the extent that we have in front of us. Without councillors going out there and having those conversations, which will be challenging, you know, this work doesn't move forward. And there are going to be different conversations in different parts of the city. Nearly 3 million folks here in Toronto, a lot of different geographies, a lot of different landscapes. Those conversations will look different. They will be hard, but they are important. For me, I want to see these types of housing options moving forward, and that's why I put up my hand for the pilot in Ward 19 when it came to council, and that's why we're moving a motion on it here today. I've heard the criticism from some folks that this report hasn't been bold enough, or alternatively that it's too bold. You know, I think I would disagree with both of those criticisms. I would say that we have a report that makes all of the zoning changes that we want to see now. But you can't just slam it through like that. That's not how you get good outcomes. So the evolution can't happen without the type of engagement that really brings people along and helps with their understanding. And frankly, from the policy side, also gives us those important feedback points that we need to take into consideration. So am I ready to see us implement these changes that we're talking about in the report? Am I ready for that now? Absolutely. But not everyone is. And if we don't take the time to work with folks, you lose the momentum on these things and we can actually move in the opposite direction. So thanks staff for all their work on this. Thanks everyone, to my colleagues, for your leadership and supporting and having these conversations in your communities. And I'm looking forward to seeing this move forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bradford. Any other speakers on the item? Councillor Fletcher?
Of the question just on that, Councillor Bradford. Are you looking to determine how much affordable housing would have to be a part of any relaxed zoning rules?
With respect to my motion?
Yes, in your pilot.
Well, staff are going to determine what the pilot looks like as they described to some extent, but not fully in the report. And I think that's going to be to them to determine what this pilot exactly looks like. I think that there's a number of different sites, a number of different options. How you set that up, how they want to present a pilot will be to them, and I'll look to them to provide us more details on that, at which point it comes back and we can make a decision.
I guess I'm just asking, isn't it easier if that gets baked into the pilot? That's one of the parameters that.
Yeah, I think we would certainly want to see that in the pilot. Absolutely. And we should. I just I don't know if it would be premature. Like if you read the report, there's not a lot of details on what that looks like, design competition, what the sites are. There's not a lot of detail there. That's why I'm saying come back before the end of the year, tell us what it looks like, and then we can move it forward. That's my intention.
Okay, so that's great. I won't do that now, but I may at council. This is going to council, isn't it? Yes, everything's going there on this report.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Very good.
I'll speak and I'll speak on this, Madam Chair.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor
Whenever.
Fletcher. Your 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. I'm just going to say a lot of this is about people get caught up on built form and not having any changes. But really, I think a couple of the important things are, and I'll address this further at council, I want to really make sure we're looking at the impact of existing rental affordability on the major streets. I know in the old city anyway, on the major streets, that's where the affordable apartments are. They're often second story, or they're houses on the street that are more than one family living in them, and they are where people can afford to rent. So that actually has to be added in. I'm sure planning has thought of that and can make that a component. So when I'm looking, I'm just also looking at how to bake in affordability, because if we find that the rental costs on major streets are significantly lower from a housing point of view, and really the Housing Secretariat should be part of this whole look at the rezoning, then we have to be very careful that we don't zone out and get rid of all the affordable places that currently exist, which are being changed dramatically in many parts of the city. So I think when we're looking at housing, we want to make sure that we have everything in perfect alignment, that it's all working together, and that the goals we're trying to achieve in some areas aren't overriding goals that we're trying to achieve in others. And I'm just going to give you just one example of how hard even building affordable housing, because at Gerrard and Leslie, Wood Green will now be shortly opening an affordable housing with 36 senior units in it. And this area is somehow on Gerrard, a small pocket zone neighborhood in a street that is zoned or is an avenue, which has the right-of-way widths, which goes up to 6 stories. This is only then 4 stories. So even though there was 5-story building beside it, it was very hard to get the approvals to build affordable housing, even on a major route. And I'd like that to be looked at as well, where we may have missed out on affordable housing units, where great provider like Wood Green was unable to maximize that site, even though there had been other heights somehow on that street before. What the context is, that was just a big no. And I'm pleased that we're looking at this, but I want to keep in the forefront always what we're trying to achieve, which is rental affordability, housing affordability, not extra spaces for developers to be able to build things and get some luxury apartments on transit lines. That's not my goal. I'm sure it's not the goal of the planning department. I'm sure it's not Councillor Bradford's goal. I know it's not the chair's goal. So in looking at how we're going to proceed, I wish to be very careful and very clear from council that all of our goals need to mesh when we're doing this. And what I find might be that the Housing Secretariat isn't front and center in some of this work. So I'm not going to move anything today, but I will be moving. I'd let everybody know to the impact on existing rental affordability, understanding that many part of the old city, that's really where it's affordable, and how we're going to be ensuring affordable housing at the same time as we would be loosening our zoning requirements. Thank you very much, everybody, and thanks staff for the report and initiating it, and Councillor Bradford for starting it all off.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Wong-Tam.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to support the comments that were just said by Councillor Fletcher. I think that some things for us to notice in some neighborhoods, in some areas of the city, they will venture into a pilot project, which I think is fine, and I can certainly support that. But I think Councillor Fletcher actually highlighted a critical piece of the conversation that is missing. So there's a missing middle, but there's a missing component to the conversation, and that is specifically around the type of affordable home options that will be built when this particular item moves forward. And Ward 13, Toronto Centre, is already zone residential for the most part. We have the most permissible zoning in the city, not like other downtown parts of the city. And what you'll see is that, if you want to take a look at what the pilot project will produce, you can only just take a look at what's already happening in our area. And what is happening is that developers are not necessarily interested in pursuing 4-story buildings. That may be the case in some pockets of the neighborhoods in the city. You may have people turning sort of flat bungalows into duplexes, triplexes, semi-detaches, attached homes, and I think that's going to be the trend. But when it comes to building actual volume of density that will allow for greater numbers of people and families moving to those neighborhoods, it's not going to be the volumes that we're seeing downtown. What we're seeing downtown is developers wanting to tear down what is even stable, low-rise residential neighborhoods. And I've got a particular parcel of land that's been assembled by a developer right now, or at least several developers, where they're proposing to tear down 23 homes in a apartment residential area. And they're proposing to, and those homes, those 23 properties, I should say, are low rise. They're 2 to 3 stories. They've got a lot of character in that neighborhood. And the proposal is to sort of take it all apart and to reassemble it in a way that allows them to build probably 3 or 4 60-story buildings, and they'll probably submit an application that proposes a childcare. Those are the early high notes that I'm aware of. But the reason why, Madam Speaker, I think that Councillor Fletcher's comments are just on point, and it needs to be emphasized, and it should be reinforced as this item goes through council, as staff carry out the work, is that we're not going to necessarily build more affordable home options, not the way it's set up. In order for that to happen, we need to be much more intentional with how we actually lay out the planning rationale, and we need to make sure that we specifically make the request up front when we go and work with the applicants through rezoning. Otherwise, it will be Otherwise, it just won't work because we see that it hasn't worked in other areas where we already have very permissible zoning, notably in the downtown. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers on this item? Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to be supporting the work that's in front of us, but I'm going to be doing it with two cautionary notes that I hope staff will keep in mind. The first is that as with secondary suites, there seems to be an impetus to have a conversation about lowering the development fees and the parks levies for these units. I'll remind you that it is not just in gentle density or the missing middle that people pay per unit fees to pay for the amenities we need for a growing population. It's every unit. And if we consider dropping them, we are effectively providing a subsidy. A subsidy to what, from I can tell in this report, is just private for-profit development. And I am always leery about doing that. So I hope we're mindful of that. A second and related point is that comes from my experience in my ward, where I've had quite a number of four-story buildings or intensification projects or houses being converted to several units. It's a routine part of the work that I oversee in the ward I represent. What I have noted is that the units that are built tend to be in service of people who are in the upper income quintiles. It is not in service of people who, when we look at housing affordability in Toronto, are struggling to find anywhere to live. That's not the kind of unit that gets built. And that's for the very simple reason that people are bidding up the value of units in the city of Toronto. And if we open up new land, we just open up more land for that bidding up process. The eye of investment from around the world is on the city of Toronto. And there's all kinds of people who will come in and look for their opportunity to make the money. The thing we need to have in mind is if we are going to achieve affordability, it will not be just by upzoning. It will be by social investment. It will be by making sure that governments are one of the players in developing housing in these newly zoned areas, and that they have a focus on socially owned affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Any other speakers? Seeing none. I do have a small motion, and it's just asking committee to also look at co-housing as part of this work as well. I want to thank our staff for the work that they've been putting forward. I want to thank a lot of the organizations in our city, from Ryerson to Pembina to ULI to many organizations that have started this conversation. And I think this is an important conversation because this is about the communities that we're building. We keep hearing, we need to live in the city. We can't continue developing the green belt. We need to build smarter, and I think this is what it's about. We need to be making better investments of our infrastructure. I think this is what it's all about. But this is also about people. And I think that when you're building a community and in certain parts of the city, you can tear down a bungalow, build 10,000 square feet home, sell it for $4 million, just like that. But if I wanted to build in there, and because I can't afford it, maybe do a duplex with a family member or a rental unit, I cannot do that. I think that is at the core of this issue as well, is who are we building our city for? Are we continuously be pushing out people that have actually made these neighborhoods great, contributed to these neighborhoods, have been in these neighborhoods for many, many years, and now their kids, they cannot afford to keep in our communities as well. I think this is what we need to very seriously think about. people are living differently. People are living longer. People are living in multi-generational homes. And I think we have to respond to that. I think we need to respond to what is in front of us, which is actually very much this idea that people are living locally a lot more. With COVID, we see people want to shop locally. People want to have their amenities locally. I'm looking forward to have those kinds of communities. That concept that is so much talked about, the 15-minute or 20-minute community and city, I'm looking forward to having that opportunity to have those kinds of communities in our city. I'm looking forward to having the opportunity for people to, if they need to have their parents and another extra rental unit as part of their homes in order to be able to stay in the city, I'm looking forward to facilitate that. It won't be easy work. Like Councillor Bradford said, some people saying we're going too fast, some people say we're going too slow, but it is an important conversation that we need to have. I think Torontonians want us to have this conversation. They're feeling the need to live in different ways, but most importantly, they really, really want to have communities that work. And for that to work, I think these things need to be taken consideration. We need to take in consideration the investments in public infrastructure that we're doing. We need to support our local businesses. We need to be environmentally mindful and socially mindfully with a big equity lens. And I think that's the work that needs to be done in here. And I'm very, very supportive of the work moving forward and looking forward to having the conversations across the city on this matter. And with that, I ask for a vote. Yep, so Councillor Bradford's motion, all those in favor? That carries. And my motion, all those in favor? That carries. Item as amended. That carries. Okay. Thank you. I can now go back to item number 4. Councillor Fletcher, are you okay with going back to number 4?
Yes, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Staff is ready to answer your questions, so please proceed with your questions.
Thank you. My questions are to the staff. How are the members of the T-Lab selected? What's the process at the moment that we have for that? Get our good people.
Councillor Fletcher, it's Susan Garasino, Director of Court Services. I don't know if anybody's here from the City Clerk's Appointment Secretariat, but the members of the Toronto Local Appeal Body are appointed by City Council.
Yes, but how are they selected? I know they're
They're
appointed by City Council, but I want to know how they're selected.
Susan, I can answer that if you like.
Thank you. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for the question, Councillor Fletcher. This is Matthew Cowley from the Public Appointments Team in the Clerk's Office. The members are selected through a similar process for other boards and committees in that our team does outreach and recruitment to find these members. Obviously, the members of the T-Lab, their position demands a rigorous skill set, so we seek out diverse Torontonians who hold those skills. And Council, in this case, approved a citizen nominating panel to do the selections and interviews and nominations. So there are 3 members of the public who all have extensive background in planning and law and adjudication and so on, who have been appointed by Council to bring those nominations for your consideration.
And are those public names? Do we approve those or do you select them?
Yes, no, they are. They were approved by Council. The 3 members, the chair of that nominating panel is Anna Kinistowski, who, as you know, is a former city solicitor. And the other members are Paul Emond and Lillian Ma, both who have extensive experience working with tribunals, writing about decision-making, teaching in the law, so on and so forth.
Great, thank you. And then I'm just going to ask the chair, who I'm assuming is still on this call. Is Mr. Lord still there? Because we bumped past him.
I am here.
Are you? You know, I can't see you. That's a problem. There, you're coming up on the screen now.
Good
There
morning.
you go. Good morning. Thank you very much, and thank you for your annual report. It's very much appreciated to see all the work that's done. And I'm just wondering, uh-oh, you've got the little circle going there, Mr. Lord. So are you hearing me?
I can hear you clearly, yes.
Okay, it's just your video was not working at that moment, so your video froze. So are there many decisions that come from the Committee of Adjustment that are overturned by the TLAB? Do you happen to know how many that might be? Somebody, or maybe you don't keep that stats. Maybe city clerks keeps that.
We
To
have
assist
included, through the chair, we have included in the annual report a set of summary statistics. And perhaps the closest we come to that question is found in those summary statistics in a chart that I think is in, can't quite turn it up at the moment. And there are, for 2019 in any event, a significant number of decisions of the Committees of Adjustment that get appealed and that are dealt with by TLAB in a variety of dispositions. They include approving the decision of the committee and confirming. They include refusals of the committee's decision, and they include variations of the committee's decision by the imposition of conditions. So the statistics chart that you have there show that I think in 2019, of the majority of appeals heard by TLAB, the disposition of TLAB differed in some respect to that of the committee, of the respective committee.
And how do anybody can appeal? Right now, only city council can appeal or send city lawyers. But how often does the planning, do you get reports from the planning department attached to your TLAB? I'm sorry, I'm not being as clear. It's kind of complicated because a citizen can appeal any decision of the Committee of Adjustment, correct?
Correct, as can the City of Toronto.
But it has to go through City Council for that appeal, correct? Yes.
I believe there is an internal process that council has to have the ward councillor monitor the decision process affecting matters in their ward. And if they wish to take a position, there is, I believe, a process to ask council to confirm a direction to city legal to take a position on the appeal.
Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher, that was your last question. Councillor Fletcher?
Well, is this report going to council?
Yes.
Yes, I would assume so.
Yes.
So I can ask the others there. Thank you, Mr. Lord. Thank you.
Welcome, thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Or the chair? Councillor, I can't see the screens.
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Councillor, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. The question is actually for Mr. Lord. Mr. Lord, thank you for your annual update. You've cited some challenges faced by the board, and I wanted to know if we don't take any corrective action to provide additional supports, will you be able to maintain the workload that you are seeing and the appeals that are coming your way?
And broadly, yes. In the report, there are 6 recommendations that I am asking this committee to do more than just have council receive the report. I would ask that this committee direct that the recommendations go to the city manager's office for comment.
But in terms of your specific question, the current complement of 10 members for TLAB in 2019 was ramping up and functioned well. 2020, regrettably, is not going to be a year of any useful statistics because of the provincial order counseling Planning Act matters. But in 2019, 10 members were able to respond to the number of appeals from the 4 committees of adjustment of the city and to deal with them in a deliberative manner that generally meets the TLAB's own committed timeframes, which roughly result in decisions in 1/3 of the time of the former provincial tribunal making City of Toronto Committee of Adjustment appeal decisions.
And with respect to the recommendations that have been put forward today by way of your report, if we are seeing a higher turnover of the members, what are the primary reasons for that? Why are you had four people leave and not wanting to renew? What were the reasons for that?
Respectfully, Councillor, I think Mr. Cowley may be able to respond to that better, as I think the city has conducted exit interviews. I know that from retirements that occurred in 2019, the apparent position was for personal reasons, but the details of those I am not privy to. I think that in the recommendations, there are some measures council can address to better retain members, and that is one of the focuses of those recommendations. There are significant strains on members of TLAB in the conduct of the disposition of appeals that is not recognized by the approach to supporting the members that is currently in place. And that's some of the recommendations are focused in that direction.
Thank you. So if perhaps staff can comment on the chair's response, and in particular the last comment. So not just the rationale for why members are leaving and not renewing their terms or leaving early, but also the type of supports that are needed in order for them to actually do the job that they've been tasked with.
Thank you. Susan, I wonder if from court services, if you might be better positioned to answer that as you work more closely with the members once they are appointed.
Yes, happy to answer the question. In 2019, which the report refers to, we had one member of the TLAB resign. They resigned in November, and City Clerk's appointment through that process, Council approved a new appointee in December of the same year. That individual resigned her part-time position with the Toronto Local Appeal Body to take a part-time position with the Local Planning Appeals Tribunal, the provincial body. I don't know the reasonings behind it, but that was her decision, and that was the only resignation in 2019. Similar, the year before, we had one resignation, and that person was promptly replaced with a new appointment within a couple of months. I know that the court services staff provide a high level of administrative support to the Toronto Local Appeal Body. So I'm not sure if I can add any further comments than what were in the chair's report as that goes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. That was your last question. Any other questions of staff? I can't see the screen, sorry. Can you put that? Okay, great. Any other questions of staff? Seeing none. Speakers? Councillor Wong-Tam?
Yes, thank you. I do have a motion, if the clerk can put that on the screen. And the motion, I'll just read it before it gets onto the screen, is that the Planning and Housing Committee direct the City Manager, in consultation with the Director of Court Services, the Chief Planner, the Executive Director of City Planning, and the City Clerk, to review the recommendations in the chair's report and the report back to this committee in the Q1 of 2021 on the feasibility of implementing the chair's recommendation. If the staff believe that they need to do this work faster before the 2021 budget process, then by all means, please feel free to accelerate this work. I just didn't necessarily want to ask the staff to do something that they didn't feel like they could do within the time span that's before us. I want to thank the chair for your report. It's actually quite illuminating for a number of reasons. The reason why we even have this particular body is largely because we were asking for OMB reforms. Though those OMB reforms have now been repealed, we don't necessarily have a more decentralized planning process. It's not like we've been able to sort of strengthen local planning decision making in the City of Toronto, but we somehow have taken on way more responsibility. And those responsibilities that we've taken on in exchange for the OMB reforms have now been repealed by the Ford government. That was provided to us by the Wynne government. Amount of work to do. And I want to thank the chair for the work that he's carried out on behalf of the body, but also to recognize that the members and the staff that support them in their work is probably overburdened from what I can assess that is needed in order for them to continue carrying out their duties. Having 10 members and 4 of them resigning before their time is probably the turnover is too high. It takes a certain amount of time to acclimatize to the environment, to do their actual review. But the volume of work that's before this body is probably, in my assessment, is too much. So anything that we can do to provide them more support, recognizing the challenges that they are struggling with, I appreciate that they are being very nimble in trying to do as much as they can, given the resources that we've tasked them with. But I don't want it to set up an impossible endeavor where we continue to see people leave before their term. Even if it's people who have walked into the job with good intention and then realize that it's probably way more than they bargained for. And in order for us to remove the high turnover, we're going to have to resource them properly because we are asking them to do work on behalf of the City of Toronto, and that work should be tasked and resourced properly. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors that would like to speak? Seeing none, can we move it as a package? Are members of the committee okay with that? Think so? Okay. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Item 15.7, Toronto building requirements for laneway suites access for firefighters. We have a couple of speakers. We'll start by welcoming Daniel Hall. Daniel, are you there? Good morning, Daniel. Okay, let's try George Emerson. George?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for making time. My written submission, I'll try to summarize in the time that you can provide. In essence, it comes down to the side yard access, which requires at present 1 meter by 2.1 meters. I've done a lot of study on this issue, and frankly, it negates the whole intent of why council, in its wisdom, brought forth this change in the bylaws, allowing as of right development of laneway suites. I know many people who came out to meetings. For example, Councillor Perks attended in President Ward 4 and in other wards that I've been involved with, who want to do this, but who are being told from the get-go that their property just doesn't qualify because of this regulation requiring 1 meter by 2.1 meters. Most of the houses that I've examined hundreds, and I'm presently in an ownership position, 3 of them, are just built with what is sort of standard building form of on an unshared side yard 86 centimeters or 860 millimeters, which is obviously not a meter. And almost none have the 2.1 meter clearance because of the existence of Toronto hydrometers, which are commonly placed on the side of houses. When I applied for 2 houses in Ward 4, both were at the at 90 centimeters or 900 millimeters, therefore didn't qualify. But I was also told that even if I could remove the 4 inches of brick, which is not really structurally advisable, but even if I could figure out a way around that, it was still disqualified by virtue of the Toronto hydrometers. I contacted Toronto Hydro, and they are not willing to have those things put up at 2.1 meters. Putting them on the front of houses is sometimes not feasible either because of the existing built form of these buildings. So while perhaps it was laudable to think that 1 by 2.1 would make it completely perfect for fire access, there is no perfect fire access. I'm a trained firefighter. I grew up in the household of a man who trained hundreds, thousands of firefighters in even more difficult circumstances than exist for Toronto firefighters, and that's marine firefighting. And I've consulted with with current members of the Toronto Fire Service, one of whom lives 2 doors over and is also anxious to build a laneway suite. There's no practical impediment to getting down at 860 millimeters or 86 centimeters or 90 centimeters. They get down there all the time as is to practice standard fire suppression techniques to the hundreds of thousands of homes that exist in Toronto with this kind of form. As Daniel Hall, who's an architect who's actively involved in this, who's also asked to speak to this today, has indicated in his submission, when the Building Code Commission heard an appeal and granted the appeal, it came out that the use of this existing dimension of 1 meter by 2.1 meters comes from a not relevant part of the Ontario Building Code, and that the relevant line allows for 860 millimeters or 86 centimeters. So that's what I'd ask as this goes forward for study by the city and for consideration by your committee, that you look at what is the practical width that it allows for safe and effective access for firefighters. It's the effective access that firefighters have right now for houses in front, for standard fire practice, and it's no further risk of life to continue to use this. And otherwise, if you don't change it, the intent and all the work that went into this bylaw amendment is completely negated. I can tell you that right now, it eliminates at least 90, if not more than 90%. I look at properties every day, dozens of properties every day, to consider for this kind of as of right general density, and almost every one of them doesn't qualify. So, why do we do all this only to have them completely negated by an arbitrary application of a not relevant part of the Ontario Building Code?
Thank you, George. Any questions of the speaker? Seeing none. Thanks for joining us today, George.
Thank you very much, and thanks very much for your good work in moving this forward and on other issues. Thank you all, councillors.
Thank you. Questions of staff? Councillor Perks.
Thank you. So if I'm understanding what's in front of us, there is going to be further consultation with the public on this. Can I ask if the building department can review the issue raised by Mr. Emerson?
Will, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Through the chair, that is something that we can, with the delegate or deputant just raised, that is an issue that we will be looking at as well. We have hired a fire protection engineer and consulting firm to actually help us come up with other options as a way of meeting those fire department access requirements. In particular, we're looking at ways of providing that access through the lane as opposed from the street to the laneway house where you can't achieve the 1 meter distance. So that is something we are looking at.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have just a quick question. The decision that the deputy was talking about, that is being taken into your consideration of this work, correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Seeing none. Speakers? Seeing none, I'll just be very brief. Just to thank staff, because I know that they've started doing some work on this. This is fine-tuning that needs to be done, and that I think many people interested in producing laneway suites are looking forward to have it come back. I know that staff are working hard to have it as soon as possible, but I think the deputy was right. There is a lot of properties that, because of this regulation, are not able to proceed, and we sure need to look into this further, especially after the decision that came out. So I'm looking forward to seeing the report coming back to this committee and having more of the laneway suites opportunity moving forward. So thank you. And with that, all those in favor? And that carries. Okay, next item, 15.8, authorizing the transfer of 123 Coxwell Avenue to Wood Green Community Housing. Councillor Fletcher, you said you had questions of staff? Councillor Fletcher, are you there? Okay, we'll stand this one down. We'll go to 15.9, Regent Park Phase 3 Service Manager Consent to Transfer Block 1. Councillor Wong-Tam, you held the item. You have questions of staff?
Madam Speaker, sorry, Madam Chair, I can ask my questions very quickly. Questions to staff with respect to this particular report. This report does not speak to phases 4 and 5, correct?
Good morning, Councillor Doug Rollins from Shelter Support Housing. That's correct. This speaks to consent required for phase 3 of the transfer block.
Great. Doug, just so you know, you sound a little bit underwater to me. I'm not sure if that's the same for all the other members. But yes, okay, so we'll just continue going. But just, Doug, you can just slow down your remarks. I could probably hear your answer a little bit better. Oh, you're putting on your headphone, even better. So my follow-up question is, the number of units that were in in the Regent Park revitalization when it first started back in 2000, hard to imagine, but 2003, the site is 69 acres, all of region. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct, Councillor.
Yeah.
And can you hear me better?
Yes, much better. Thank you very much, Doug. And out of those 69 acres, there were exactly 2,083 RGI TCHC rental units. Is that correct?
That's correct, Councillor.
And as we move into phases 4 and 5, I know that's not the report that's before us, but as we get to the final stages of revitalization, what will be the new number of RGI units on the 69-acre campus?
It'll be the same. It'll be the same number. So we started off with 2,083 RGI units on the site, and through the intensification of the site, the developers are repaying for the unit-by-unit replacement of those RGI units. So at the end of all phases of Regent Park, there will be 2,083 rent-geared to income units. There'll be 400 net new affordable housing units, and there will be 5,400 units created by market developers.
And with respect to the 400 affordable housing units, are they rental affordable housing or are they ownership?
I believe they are rental. There may be a small ownership component, and I would need to rely on my colleagues at the Housing Secretariat or Regent Park to add detail there.
And then the 400 that are affordable housing units, predominantly rental, it was not based on the income approach that we now have moved to with the new housing plan. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's on based on an old model, which was 80% of AMR, for qualifying households.
And with respect to coming back to the 2,083 RGI units, obviously a lot more density has been added to the 69 acres. What would it take in order for us to increase that number? We don't have a lot of land left here. We've seen a lot of development, but we have great needs, being people who are on the wait list for housing.
I may need other colleagues to weigh in here, but I would see the answer a couple fold. Number one, we would need dedicated funding to increase the number of RGI units. And again, you would need units for which to put those subsidies. So again, there's approximately 2,000 RGI units existing, 400 affordable, and 5,400 market, which are owned and operated by those independent developers. Not sure if others will need to weigh in if you have further questions on that, Councillor.
Sure, I can step in, Doug, through the chair. It would require an official plan amendment and a complete rezoning. The last time we undertook a rezoning was in 2013, and so we would need another rezoning and planning approvals to increase the density.
Madam Chair,
is that all? Just rezoning? Sorry, go ahead, Juliana.
I was just going to say, while we're not building RGI units, one of the things we are doing is trying to increase the affordability through the housing benefit and the amount of housing benefit we could provide. So that's one of the ways that we try and increase that affordability for our residents.
Thank you. And would those housing benefits be applied to market units? Because they have to be tied to.
We try and apply and Abby can correct me if I'm wrong, or Doug, we try and apply those housing benefits to the affordable units. So we layer on top of the affordability component, additional housing benefits to make it more affordable.
Abby, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, housing benefits, through the chair, housing benefits are a really good way to make market rental units more affordable. I don't have the information about how many we're intending to layer on specifically at Regent Park, but it is a strategy that can work well to increase affordability.
Okay, and so recognizing that housing benefits could be applied to the potential 400 affordable housing options, is that where it's going?
That was your last question, Councillor.
Sorry, okay. Is that where it's going? The housing benefits?
I would defer that question to the SSHA.
Certainly, we work in partnership, Councillor. Thanks for the question and referral, Abby. We work in partnership with the Housing Secretariat to apportion housing benefits to a number of the affordable housing developments. So we have a greater mixed income community where the bulk of the residents pay an affordable rent, and through the housing benefits, the rent becomes more affordable and provides a deeper subsidy to those in need.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions of staff? Was that Councillor Fletcher? Go ahead.
It is. I just wanted to be clear that the housing benefits program that is set to achieve greater affordability in affordable units is administered through SSHA right now, at the moment.
That's correct, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. On behalf of the Housing Secretariat, because they're identifying the affordable units.
Yeah, so the Housing Secretariat will develop the project, and we work in partnership with them to work with the developer to create an access plan, and included in that is an attempt to negotiate a number of units that can provide deeper affordability via housing allowance. Subject to the availability of allowances and funding.
I just want to review a few things, and one is that the 69 acres is not actually the original Regent Park footprint. What was the original Regent Park footprint? It wasn't. The 69 acres is made up of off-site lots as well. So
Through
60
the
Richmond is
chair,
part, yeah.
Yeah, the 69 acres is what is the land that's on site, and then what you're speaking about, Councillor, is the off-site locations, and that's land area that's added to the 69 acres.
So what's
That's
the
in
total
addition
then?
to the 69.
Oh, okay. So what's the total then in order to achieve that? What's the total with the offsite?
I would have to get back to you on that.
Okay, so let's get that one for council because 60 Richmond is one of those sites. What are the other sites, Mr. Tong, for the offsite contributions?
Sure. So it was 60 Richmond, 501 Adelaide, and 91 Carlton.
And how many units at 60 Richmond? Do you know? I'll let you look that up while I ask another question, which is probably for somebody in planning, that the original rezoning for Regent Park, it might even be for you, Mr. Tong, was to have the replacement RGI, 250 affordable units, and how many market units were there in the original rezoning? $250 new affordable.
Through the chair. So all 2,083 were rent geared to income units on the site existing.
Yes.
Through the 2013 rezoning and through different funding streams through the previous Affordable Housing Office and now the Housing Secretariat, we were able to add 400 affordable rental units.
So originally, at the very beginning of the rezoning, before you were here, there was a formula for RGI existing replacement, number of affordable units, and how many market units. I think I just want to establish what the baseline was in probably 2005, maybe. And now you had another rezoning, and we should establish that there's been changes. So it's helpful to understand the site from the beginning. 69 acres as your main area with a certain number of units, then 3 off-site that contribute to the unit replacement, or are they contributing to the affordable? Could you, do you have that right there, or am I challenging you with
No,
too much detail?
I would have to go back to the original 2005 rezoning to get you that number of market units that were approved.
Okay, so I think that would just be helpful if I could have that just in a chart, and I'll just be clear in what it is. It's the original zoning and rezoning, number of replacement RGI, which has remained constant through all of the different configurations, number of phases, which is 5, number of affordable housing that was non-RGI that was introduced at the original rezoning, the number of market units. Do you want me to email you? Number of market units, what the breakdown is between market condo, market rental in the original rezoning, then come back up to 2013 and look at when you went in for further density, how those numbers changed, including any breakdown between market rental and market condo in original and throughout the phases. This is a very complicated project. I give you that 100%. There's so many phases and so many units. And then how many units there are in the offsite that are contributing to the overall replacement.
Councillor Fletcher, that was your last question.
Helpful. Thank you. Just checked with Mr. Tong that yes, he's got all of that. Just email me if you need me to clarify any of those things. Thank you so much.
We can get that information to you.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Nope. Seeing none. Speakers? Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I do have a motion, if the staff can please put that onto the screen. The motion is essentially asking staff in the different divisions to work together to review the feasibility of increasing the number of RGI units, as well as affordable housing options in phases 4 and 5. It doesn't necessarily touch what is before us today, because I recognize that those agreements and those negotiated contracts were done long before I arrived. But I am going to take this opportunity, because this is probably the very first report that has appeared before our committee since I became the new councillor in 2018 in Regent Park. Things that I've heard in the local community, and I want to just recognize that this is a very complicated multi-year revitalization effort, but things I've been hearing in the local community is that community members are quite concerned that there is not more being done with the incredible landmass that we have there. And I don't want to necessarily go back in time, just because, number one, I don't have the ability to do so. But the things that we do know today are probably very different than what was the condition back in 2003. And so I want to just acknowledge that if there is a way for us to increase the number of RGI units, increase the affordable rental and housing options in Regent Park, leveraging the fact that we own this land, that we are technically in the driving seat of revitalization, then we should try to strive to get the maximum outcome in return for the City of Toronto, and namely for those who are tasked to doing this work. And that includes the incredible redevelopment staff at TCHC. They have been wonderful to work with. Vincent, you are usually a wealth of information. I can't imagine all that you have locked in that steel trap mind of yours. But I do recognize that you also inherited this revitalization effort, which began before your time here, and probably mine as well. And as the city has grown, it's gotten denser, it's gotten much more complicated. We need to be able to find out whether or not our approach to Regent Park is exactly, should it be shrink wrapped in time the way it has been, or is there something we can do to update the revitalization effort? Is there new sources of funding that we need to go and pursue? Is there a new model that will build upon the existing strengths of the old model that we can expand upon? And that's what my motion is hoping to do. And of course, come back to us with a source of funding, and let us know how we can actually do it. And I will look forward to reviewing that business plan with each and every single one of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers?
Yes.
Councillor Fletcher.
Councillor Fletcher. Good morning. Thank you very much. And I think it's this is, as Councillor Wongtam has pointed out, a really long project. This is now what year? 15 years. So it's not a quick one. None of the revitalizations are quick. They're very complicated. And then we've upgraded, and we're doing quite a few things differently. I was very interested to hear about the housing benefits that can be applied to ensure that there's more affordability in the affordable housing. I believe that somewhere in there, and this is why I wanted this chart. I think it's helpful to see what was passed. There's 50 to 150 affordable home ownership, which is not a rental situation. I'm not sure how much market rent was built in. We're now trying to build in market rent. After the Auditor General, we know her report was very clear that in the Toronto Community Housing Revitalizations, the formula has been to replace the RGI at no cost to TCHC, which is so important. And then it has been market condos that have been built generally everywhere. With the Don Somerville project, that's changed. And with our Housing Now projects, it's very much changed. We have a different formula for our lands. And I appreciate in trying to now squeeze out as much as we can, given how things have shifted. So Regent Park is really and truly the crown jewel. It's #1 large redevelopment. It is 69 acres downtown, very valuable lands that we have been able to use to revitalize the 2,000 RGI. There's nowhere else that has 2,000 units to be rebuilt. Mostly, I think Lawrence Heights is number 2 at 800. So this was a huge undertaking that, as we know, isn't yet finished. And I know in Councillor Wong-Tam's capable hands that it will be done well. This was Councillor McConnell's baby, and I think she'd be very happy to know that it's passed into such capable hands as Councillor Wong-Tam, who is looking at increasing, if possible, any of, or aligning this project in any way possible with the thinking that's 15 years later from the original. And I think I say this every time, but the original plan, it was John Sewell and the community that came into Community Council and suggested that there had to be some affordable rental on site, at which point I believe there was 250 added. That was 10%. So we know large sites are supposed to deliver 20%. This is a large site. So I think 20%, we're getting close with the 400, but I'm not sure what the actual
Councillor.
makeup of that is. So
Thank you.
will hear that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Fletcher. Any other speakers? Seeing none?
Do you not have a timer? Just point of order. Have you got a timer?
I do.
Like we have at council?
Yeah.
Well, is there not some way that can be displayed when we're speaking so that at least I can't see it. I'm not running my own clock.
Yeah.
And I would ask the clerk if there's some way to do that, or you to do that. So everybody's been cut off now today, and I don't like to be cut off. I like to end my remarks properly, but I can't because
So the clerk is telling me that they won't be able to do that, Councillor, so I'll interrupt way before so that you can still have time to finish. But I'm going to have a minute
warning.
I'm going to have to interrupt still. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. A little, yeah. Normally, Chair, we can make sure that we're thinking in a 5-minute stream, and I'm sure it's also difficult for the deputants as well. So it's our one failing here online, and I don't know why we can't have that clock showing here when we can at council. What's the answer?
Well, we had it in council. In council, we did have it. Okay, so Clark's is looking into that, Councillor, but we need to proceed with the agenda. So they are looking into that. I did tell them that we had it at council. Councillor Fletcher, you weren't at your, oh, sorry, I didn't vote on the item. All those in favor of the motion, please. Councillor Wong-Tam's motion. That carries. And item as amended. All those in favor? That carries. Great. Councillor Fletcher, you had some questions on item 15.8, authorizing the transfer of 123 Coxwell Avenue to Wood Green Community Housing.
No, I think I had that. And I wanted to know, that's right. I wanted to know who the AIS is and how many other unit or buildings they have in the city, or is this their only one? And could you please tell me who the chair of who your clerk is for this committee right now? Because I'm going to be sending a motion for another item. 685 Queen Street. Who's the clerk?
Motions, it's phc@toronto.ca, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So that's my first question.
Through the chair, Doug Rollins from Shelter Support and Housing. Councillor, Combination Information and Support. It's a supportive housing provider, commonly referred to as AIS. They own 4 properties within the city: 123 Coxwell, 58 Lewis Street, 1076 Bathurst Street, and 49 Mutual Street. In total, there are 64 units within those properties. Only the 123 Coxwell, the report that's before you, is the only one where there is city interest through a social housing agreement developed in 94.
Sorry, I don't understand. So Lewis Street's actually in my region. So what do you mean by city interest?
So there was an agreement for 123 Coxwell Avenue. They appeared to have got some minor variances back in 1992, and as a result of that, they agreed to enter into an agreement to maintain 13 dwelling units for low or moderate income people as a result of that transaction. It's an old agreement.
Are the others not covered? Are
The others are not covered. AIS receives funding from the province as a supportive housing provider. So this is the only property for which the City of Toronto needs to provide consent to allow the transfer of AIS properties to Wood Green.
Oh, it's just our consent that's required. So
Correct.
These can't be transferred to, they can't be transferred to others. Could 58 Lewis be transferred to another housing provider?
It's being transferred now to Wood Green.
No, 58 Lewis.
Yeah, that's part of the transfer. It just does not require City Council approval.
Wood Green is taking all of AIS.
Correct.
So AIS was a housing provider that is kind of typical, maybe particularly in the East End. I don't know about other areas of town, but where small groups got together and got funding for housing. Is that, do I have that right?
That's my understanding, and then the funding here was through the Ministry of Community and Social Services as a supportive housing provider.
And then there's times where those boards, like that was in 1992, it's probably from the 80s, that the boards or the authorities for these organizations aren't as robust, or what's the reason why they're all being transferred? Does it have to do with that?
I think this is an area where I think city staff have been very supportive over time, where you've got smaller organizations who can connect on a mission-driven basis with another larger organization, and through those coming together can provide not only benefits to the residents, benefits in terms of connecting with the partners and
stability.
And asset pieces as well, Councillor, in terms of having better economies of scale and opportunities to refinance and grow their portfolios.
So how many of these small, I mean, I've had the one at Wood Green next door. Churches have put these together. They're one-offs, a lot of places, small organizations. Do we have a list and know who they all are and how well they're functioning? Wood Green is great because they're able to assume these. They've had to assume 444 Logan. We've passed that today as well. The city's extending one more year for Wood Green to be basically caretaking that, which was a small nonprofit that ran into administrative trouble or couldn't properly administer the building any longer. Board of directors is old. They don't have an administrator any longer. So how many of these situations do we have? And is it your division, Mr. Rollins, that oversees that?
Well, the City of Toronto and the Shelter Support and Housing Administration Division will look after those nonprofit and cooperative housing providers that were devolved to the City of Toronto through the Housing Services Act. There's approximately 200 providers. The vast majority are small, I would say, under 200 units. There is also a litany of other housing providers funded through the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Community and Social Services, federal co-ops as well. So we don't have as good of a line of sight on all those organizations. But clearly we want to encourage groups like Wood Green to reach out to other organizations where there's synergies in the population they serve and the area of the city that they operate, and to encourage them to consider whether they would provide better value to the community as a whole, as opposed to individually.
Are any of these sites that could possibly be redeveloped? Because that really would be, I'm assuming again, that your client, so to speak, is the housing secretariat, because we're keeping housing, maintaining affordable housing in any of these scenarios. And are there sites here that they'd be looking at that could also be a redevelopment model and adding new housing on any of them? Or is that a lens that you wouldn't be doing that? That'd be the housing secretariat.
Well, it's a partnership.
30
We work very
seconds,
closely with our providers and the housing secretariat, and clearly this provider in Wood Green has taken advantage of the co-investment fund to develop new and to create new affordable housing. So they are interested long-term in growing and diversifying their portfolio. And if those things come to light, we do connect in with the housing secretariat to make sure they're provided the most expert advice on intensification and redevelopment.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Seeing none. Speakers? Any councillor to speak? Councillor Fletcher?
No, I would just say, as I did earlier, I would like to thank AIS for their work in the community over the past number of decades, and looking forward to working with Wood Green at 123 Coxwell as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fletcher?
Yeah, I certainly want to support the Councillor Bradford in this transfer, and Wood Green, which has transferred a number of properties to of providers that have no longer been able to operate. That, as we're looking at all that housing built in the 70s and the 80s, that was dollars from the federal government, and this is a renewal of that housing, because many of these boards and many of those who are administering it just don't have the same oomph as they used to have, which is why I asked Mr. Rollins that question about how many of these small providers, or I'm just going to call them critical providers, are there out there that are facing some of these issues. And I'm so well aware of it from the 1117 Gerard, which was the Riverdale United Church, that I think had 3 people that were on its board, and they were also the board for the seniors housing next door at Heather Terrace. So when Wood Green bought that site, part of the good news was they would take over the administration of about 40 units of seniors housing. And again, at McCleary Towers, Wood Green took over from a small nonprofit group. It wasn't an organization, it was a group with a board. And there's a lot of them. People are aging, they don't have the same access to funds. So to make sure, I think this is really an important thing for us to keep in mind, to be looking at how some of the other providers, whether it's Mainstay, whether it's HouseLink, whether it's Wood Green, can step in particularly around the supportive housing portfolio, or just generally the affordable housing portfolio, which exists with many of these small providers. Not that they're unable to do it, but they do need to look ahead to the point where they don't have that same committed group that started it off, small, community-based, but at some point they may need a transfer to a more established long-term organization. So congratulations on this one, and I'm very happy Wood Green is in the field. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Any other speakers? Seeing none. Motion to approve, Councillor Bradford. All those in favor? That carries. Thank you. Okay, so city item 15.10, City of Toronto submission on Bill 184. We have speakers. Aaron Kaplan.
Hello.
Hi, Aaron. You have 5 minutes. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity to address PHC. I think we can all agree that Bill 184 is moving closer to royal assent. Bill 184 streamlines the eviction process by coercing tenants into accepting unaffordable repayment proposals from their landlords for fear of being disadvantaged during a subsequent eviction hearing, and in some cases by entirely removing the legal requirement for a hearing before a landlord can evict a tenant. These features of Bill 184 will cause a dramatic increase in the number of evictions, given the large number of renters who have suffered financially during the COVID shutdown and consequently are behind on their rent. Yes, we can expect a tsunami of evictions in the near future. To the best of my knowledge, the city has not had a public discussion regarding which services will be provided to evicted tenants and by whom. I personally do not have an understanding of what role the city has in coordinating these services. The city website indicates that the City of Toronto provides support and information to residents in rental units who are at risk of losing their home and being evicted. If I understand the website correctly, there are 10 housing help centers in the city. Are these the only agencies that are able to assist evicted tenants? It is of the utmost urgency that the Planning and Housing Committee understand the operational implications of the forthcoming wave of evictions and what role the city will play in coordinating the allocation of shelter for the evicted tenants. Rehousing the newly homeless will be costly as rents are high and rent control has been compromised by the Conservatives' previous housing bill. Ultimately, this cost will be borne by the city, either financially through increased shelter and social support program costs, or socially in the form of new, bigger tent cities. And so it behooves us to prepare now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Any questions of the speaker? Seeing none. Thanks for joining us today. Next speaker is Marcia Stone. Marcia, are you there? Good morning, good afternoon, Marcia. Thanks for joining us today. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, can you hear us, Marcia?
Okay, I can hear you, but I didn't know if you can hear me because it looks like I've been muted.
No, we're good. We're good to go.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. No problem. I thank you very much. My name is Marcia Stone. I'm the co-chair of Western ACORN. ACORN is an association of community organizers for Reform Now. We're a membership group of 130,000 low and moderate income members across Canada. We are a tenant and community union fighting for affordable housing, living wages, good jobs, healthy homes, internet for all, and fighting against predatory lenders. We began organizing in Western Neighbourhoods 16 years ago and have grown to over 40,000 members across the city of Toronto. I am here today to talk about the city's submission on Bill 184, Protecting Tenants and Strengthening Community Housing Act 2020. ACORN is opposed to this bill. During public committee hearings 3 weeks ago at Queen's Park, ACORN members from all across Ontario made 12 video deputations pointing out how this bill attacks low-income renters' rights to housing. Excuse me. We did a survey of our members back in April and found 50% of low and moderate income tenants were worried they would not make their May rent. The situation since then has only gotten worse for us. With COVID-19, we have been out of work, without childcare, getting gouged by our cell phone and internet providers, and seen our members forced to turn to predatory lenders like Easy Financial and Money Mart. We appreciate, sir, but $2,000 does not go far living in Toronto. So we need Toronto City Council to do everything it can to stop COVID evictions and stop Bill 184. The bill speeds up evictions in the middle of a pandemic, and no one needs that. This bill will take away the rights of tenants, rights tenants have fought so hard for over many years. We have a right to housing. We need housing. We work so hard to pay our rent, and this bill is going to make it much easier for landlords to take away by evicting us. It makes it so that an illegal rent increase will now become legal if the tenant doesn't file an application to fight the increase within 1 year. It takes away a tenant's rights to easily defend themselves at eviction hearings because of tenants facing eviction wouldn't be able to raise new issues such as disrepair at the hearing unless they formally applied to introduce that matter in advance. And it transforms the LTB into debt collection forum by allowing landlords to pursue tenants for rent and utilities arrears through the LTB instead of small claims court, as is currently the case. It does so many other terrible things to tenants. to tenants across the city. Bill 184 is a bill that makes it harder for tenants to defend themselves and easier for landlords to make money. We are not a commodity. So we're proud to see the city's submission. We hope that you stand with tenants. Do what Doug Ford claims and be for the people. We are 50% of the population of Toronto. However, we do see some things in submission that they think the city could take the lead on. For example, implementing real rent control. And I believe there was a few of you that voted against real rent control back on June 30th. Strengthening the rules around above guideline increases. We hope the city will put its money where its mouth is and put in strong AGI rules where it has the power, like on development built on public land. We need you to declare loudly that you support us tenants that couldn't pay our rent and are now at risk of eviction, and call on the government to repeal this bill. The city is going to need to do all it can on the issue of affordable housing because the province isn't interested. Tenants will need somewhere to go, and they need you to do the following.
30 seconds left, Marcia.
Thank you. We need you to vacate. We need vacant unit tax, stronger rent safe to protect affordable housing. Our demands for no displacement policy for resist rent evictions, deny loans and building permits to predatory landlords and known rent evictors, require real rent control and developments built on developments getting public funds or lands.
Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you very much.
Are there any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, thanks for joining us today. Members of the committee, would anybody like to place a motion that we can finish the agenda, or it's 12:30? Do you want to break for lunch? What's the will of the committee? Can we continue?
I'm happy to move continue.
Happy to continue? Okay.
I'd like to move that we break for lunch. This is going to take a little while. I'd like to move that we break for lunch.
Okay, we're done with speakers, Councillor.
Okay. All right. I'll let it go then.
Okay. Sorry, that was our last speaker. Yeah, I should have mentioned that before. Okay. So motion, Councillor McKelvey moves a motion to continue until we finish the agenda. All those in favor? That carries. Okay. So we are done with speakers on this item. Questions of staff? Councillor Perks.
I had sent some questions along to the city solicitor. I hope they're prepared. So in my reading of this report and some of the public commentary, it looks like certain sections of the bill, including some of the amendments that the Conservative Party moved during second reading, I believe, that in many cases, the rights of tenants to access justice equally are being eroded by this bill. Am I correct in my understanding?
Through you, Madam Chair, certainly you did hear from the deputant some matters of concern, and I guess I would summarize them primarily as three areas. The first, as the deputant has indicated, deals with whether or not the tenant can raise new information or new issues at any hearing with respect to eviction for non-payment of rent. And the new legislation would essentially require the tenant to provide advance written notice of any new issues being raised. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to raise those new issues at the hearing. The second issue deals with mediation or other dispute resolution tools. So the amendments through the legislation would allow the board to attempt to settle matters by actually imposing mediation or some other dispute resolution means, even if both parties, the landlord and the tenant, don't wish to participate. So it may be that the tenant simply wishes to go to a hearing and they might be prevented from doing so because of the imposition of mediation by the board. And then finally, the third area deals with
situations where the tenant and the landlord have actually entered into a repayment or payment agreement with respect to the arrears of rent. The new legislation would allow the board under certain circumstances, such as in the case of the tenant missing a payment, to simply proceed without notice and without a hearing to eviction. So certainly when you look at the legislation and matters of this nature, it may raise areas of concern with respect to a reduction, at least in terms of procedural fairness or access to justice with respect to tenants.
Thank you. Would it be possible for you to provide some advice on whether or not the city can challenge the legality of this bill, given those 3 points that you just raised, and provide that advice directly to council?
Yeah, certainly. Of course, we won't limit our advice to those 3 items, but we could report directly to the council at the end of the month.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Any other councillors with questions?
Councillor Wong-Tam to a question, please.
Thank you, Councillor. I didn't have the screen up. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And through you to staff, with respect to the council City Council sits at the end of this month, so our scheduled meeting is the 28th and 29th of July. And there is, as noted by Mr. Kaplan at the beginning of his submission, is that this bill is going through 3rd reading and possibly passed and adopted into law this week. In your report, the report of staff, I think the submission was already submitted to the provincial legislature. Is that not correct?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
And so if there's any additional changes that we would like to make, and the bill then becomes law, it's too late, isn't it?
And the timing, through the chair, the timing for consultation responses has certainly been a challenge for staff. If there is any new direction from the committee today, then we will certainly update the submission that we have already made.
Tenant organization, as well as legal centers that provide tenant advocacy, they have been cited to say that Bill 184 could create a humanitarian disaster on our doorsteps with respect to mass eviction. Would you agree with those assertions?
Through the chair, there is certainly a great deal of anxiety at a staff level and in community about a potential wave of evictions that could come on the back of COVID and through these changes. And I think we made it clear in our submission that any changes to improve the process around the LTB, which we broadly support, needs to be backed up with much greater resources for tenants in order to be able to exercise their rights effectively. So yes, there is a great deal of concern.
Yeah. With respect to the number of evictions that could be forthcoming, we know that 2 million Ontarians have lost their jobs due to no fault of their own, mostly COVID related. And some of the government assistance programs are going to come to an end, especially as we move into lockdown lifting, stage 3. What do you anticipate would be the downfall for the city with respect to the crowded shelter systems, the respite sites that are full, the number of encampment proliferation across the city, and then this bill comes on the heels of all that? What do you anticipate as a housing secretary is going to happen to the city with respect to the conditions that we are going to have to respond to just because no one else is responding?
Through the chair, briefly, I will just talk about the Housing Secretariat's position, then maybe I'll let SSHA speak to the concern around shelters. And we're monitoring closely with other private landlords, especially larger landlords, to monitor kind of how much rent is being paid. Certainly in the first couple of months during COVID, there was real concern that we could see, a loss of rent 50 to 60%. Generally, we weren't seeing that across the board, although it was very, certainly in terms of poorer areas of the city, buildings with renters with lower income, certainly the non-payment issue was much greater in line with the loss of jobs that you have identified. So there is significant concern. It's hard to predict exactly how many people would find themselves not being able to pay rent for a number of months and therefore face eviction. It's really hard to estimate, but I'll let Marianne talk about concern around the shelter system.
Thank you, Abby, and to you, Councillor. I mean, it is a concern. Over the last 4 months, we have been focusing on creating physical distancing in the shelter system. So although we've opened up 32 new sites, we haven't created any additional capacity in the shelter system. We are focused at the moment on helping people who are staying outside to move inside to safer spaces. We are concentrating on moving people into permanent housing because that's a much more sustainable way to manage. And we have permanently housed almost 1,400 people since the beginning of COVID. So it is definitely more effective to either have people in permanent housing or maintain people in permanent housing before they become homeless. And SSHA will be focusing on those two elements over the next few months.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions of staff? Seeing none. Speakers. Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a motion. Thank you. I move that the Planning and Housing Committee direct the City Solicitor to report directly to City Council at its meeting July 28th, 29th, 2020 with advice on the possibility of legally challenging those provisions of Bill 184 which undermine the rights of tenants to a fair hearing. I believe that's self-explanatory given the questions that I was asking the City Solicitor. This is the least we can do. It is absolutely clear to anyone following housing issues in the City of Toronto over the last few years that even before COVID, we were in a housing emergency, and it has only been exacerbated by COVID. Everything that I see in economic forecasting in Canada suggests that we are about to experience a wave of personal bankruptcies. Many tenants would have made agreements with their landlords to temporarily manage their finances, but the work isn't coming back, and they don't know when the work is coming back. It shocks the mind that the provincial government would even consider a piece of legislation that would create still more homelessness in the City of Toronto. It is, as has been described, a humanitarian crisis that's coming at us. We should do everything we can as a city to help defend the rights of tenants, who, after all, are close to half the people who live in our city. So I hope that the City Solicitor can provide us with some tools that allow us to challenge those areas of the bill that are manifestly unfair to tenants in terms of their rights to natural justice and their rights to a fair hearing. But I hope we also look to ways to go beyond that. The City of Toronto and the Mayor have spoken out strongly at times when the province has lost its way. For example, when the province was considering massive cuts to public health spending. This is another moment like that. And I'm sure all of us are going to be taking every opportunity to speak out against this extraordinarily dangerous piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Other speakers? Councillor Wong-Tam.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I do have a motion as well, and the clerks can put that on the screen. City Council requests the province of Ontario, through a range of different ministries to provide open data on eviction applications heard before the landlord tenant board, including the types of notice provided from landlords or tenants, the type of applications made, the size of households, and other sorts of information, all to be collected so we can understand who is being evicted. We also want to be able to ask them to identify tenants who need supportive housing supports through the eviction process, and to ensure that those supports are available so that people can be rehoused as quickly as possible. And also to request the different provincial ministries to provide and fund emergency shelter spaces and related supports in municipalities due to the increased number of evictions caused by this particular bill. And then to ask the different ministries to invest in the development of affordable rental housing and provide additional housing benefits to municipalities. And of course, this includes on Toronto, to ensure that we can offset the harm of the bill, and especially for those who are paying more than 30% of their income to their housing costs, who are at the risk of being evicted. And Madam Chair, I think that it's been a very difficult period since the COVID lockdown, just because of the communities that I have the privilege of representing. Many of them have been struggling because of the COVID economic lockdown through no fault of their own. They've lost jobs, they're working precariously, they're living precariously. This particular bill is sending a horror wave through the community of tenants. Tenants who are scraping by, barely making it, barely hanging on, and just unclear of what the future will look like. Last Thursday, Councillor Perks and I participated in a press conference where we highlighted some of these concerns, and we of course couldn't get through all of it, but it was quite moving, Madam Speaker, to hear the tenants speak specifically about the harm that they see coming down the pipeline, what they already anticipate to make, and what is to be believed that Bill 184 will contribute to creating the largest mass eviction that this province has seen. Toronto and other municipalities in this province will then preside over the largest housing crisis in the history of this province. And the words humanitarian crisis and humanitarian disaster were being used by notable scholars and academics and lawyers on what they forecast is going to be an outcome that the City of Toronto is not prepared for, simply because we are already struggling with the COVID social inequities that have sort of now become much more visible to all. For those who've been struggling for some time, Madam Chair, they already knew that those breaks in the social safety net existed. But now for the rest of Toronto, who perhaps was living a very comfortable middle-class lifestyle, they've also now felt the pressures. I'm incredibly worried about the impacts of Bill 184. I'm incredibly worried about the communities that we represent. I'm incredibly worried about the impacts to those who are already living with harm. And the tragedy here is that this is entirely political and entirely preventable. And if there is going to be a path forward for this city, and for those who are most vulnerable, we're going to have to be much, much louder. There is no polite way of saying this to the province than this is the wrong direction. So Councillor Perks has put forward a motion that I think will be incredibly helpful, but it's going to take time and energy to fight a legal challenge. The only way for us to avert this humanitarian and further deepening of the housing crisis is for the provincial government to change course. And I hope that they do that.
Thank you, Councillor. Other speakers, Councillor Bradford.
Thanks very much, Madam Speaker. I want to start by expressing my strong support for the city's position on protecting affordable rental housing and increasing protections for tenants. I also, share the sentiments of my colleagues. I will be supporting both of those motions. I think they're helpful. To say Bill 184 is concerning legislation, that would be an understatement. It's not the right direction to go. It should be reconsidered. It should be taken off the table. Tenants should not be facing increased burdens right now on living in their homes, now more than ever. And as we heard this morning, this afternoon, from our legal team, from our housing team, this will absolutely make tenants more vulnerable. It's just not good. It's effectively eroding the rights of tenants and access to the judicial process at the landlord-tenant board. So we all know, everyone here on this committee, folks around City Council, we all know that our housing systems are incredibly strained. That was true before the pandemic. It has been exacerbated through COVID-19, and we are headed into a situation where we will be facing higher unemployment. Folks will be more precarious when it comes to work. There's a great deal of uncertainty in the economy, and frankly, housing affordability has never been worse than it is now. It is just a huge challenge that we are facing. And while tenants can dispute any new eviction orders at the landlord and tenant board, a tenant would need to be well enough informed about their rights to do so. And that's challenging for all of us, legal experts, everybody involved in this space, let alone someone who's focusing about putting food on the table and maintaining employment and all the other things that people are trying to do in their day-to-day lives. That sort of communication is challenging at the best of times, and it's certainly very difficult given everything we're all facing right now. So fact is, tenants shouldn't need to be legal experts on the workings of rental legislation to uphold their right to housing. That's where I'm at. That's where we're all at here in this discussion. And so I fully support the city's position, the recommendations, the motions brought forward by my colleagues. And we need to see improvements that actually support existing tenants while also protecting the city's affordable units from turnover. So that's where we need to be. That's it from me, Speaker.
Thank you, Councillor. Other speakers, Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly echo everything my colleagues have said and thank the staff for the submissions that they made on Bill 184 to the committee, and for everybody's strong commitment to maintaining people in place. We did set up our committee to assist in renovictions. This is really one big renoviction bill. You don't even have to do a renovation. It is a terrible situation that so many tenants have been in touch about as to what can happen to them, and finding that there was a freeze on evictions, residential evictions, that was put in by the Ford government at the beginning of COVID, and now they can backdate the eviction to the beginning of COVID, is just the most disappointing thing. It's the most heinous act, really, for tenants. You can imagine the number of landlords that will take advantage of that. What really disturbs me is that the impression that was given is that residents who were tenants would have some protection during COVID. They have lost their employment. They are maybe now on CERB. They are living hand to mouth. They are worried about their future. They are paying as much rent as possible, perhaps not all of it. Maybe they've skipped some. And despite the freeze on evictions, there was no freeze on giving out N4s and N5s for non-payment of rent. They were still given out. And for that end, any of the N4s and N5s acted on. That's why I just say it's heinous. It's when people thought they were being protected, weren't being protected. And so much of what's being said now, this is coming in. Something looks really great in an announcement, but the real fact of the matter is that anybody who had a non-payment of rent for the first month of COVID, whether it was April 1st or May 1st, Now that landlord can go back and take action under this bill. So I'm glad to see we're fighting it so strongly. The community has asked us to be very, very strong on it. And I appreciate the other motions that are coming here today and the staff report. So I will be asking for a recorded vote on this one, all motions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers on this item? Seeing none, I'll say a few words. I want to thank staff for their submission. It has been a challenge with some of these bills to coordinate between reporting to committees and submitting, and the timelines have been very, very short in a lot of these issues. I will be supporting the motions in front of us as well. I think they help this issue. I mean, this is an issue that we've talked about last council. There was a motion asking the province as well to come and support tenants, and I think this is complementary of that issue as well. Since COVID started, this was very much in the minds of everybody that was looking into housing issues. And as Councillor Fletcher was saying, we thought there was some kind of protection. We were concerned on how the transition was going to happen with the end of evictions. And what we see now is that we're actually going backwards. Not only are we taking away a lot of these rights from the tenants, we're going backwards on timing of what is considered to provide the evictions to tenants. I think this is very much a concern for everybody here at the city. We know already the pressure that our housing system and our shelter system is under. We know how much work and effort we've all been doing to try to address just the current shelter situation. And that cannot be successful if we have an increase on evictions and people ending up in our doorsteps and in our shelters. Because if we don't deal with this situation in a humane way and in the most efficient way, which is keeping people housed, that is what's going to happen. There is no other way. Homelessness will increase. People will end up in our shelter systems. And so it is imperative that we call on the province to work on these issues because it will be at our doorstep. So I very, very strongly support the recommendations, and these were all issues that this council have voted before. And like I said, I will be supporting the two motions that are in front of us as well, because I think this is important. To fight on behalf of the tenants and to fight on behalf of a healthy city. That's what we're doing at the end of the day. It's not only tenants, it's on behalf of a healthy city. So with that said, can I get a vote on Councillor Perks' motion? And that's a recorded vote as per Councillor Fletcher's request.
All those in favor of the motion before you? Councillor Bradford?
In favor.
Councillor Perks?
In favor.
Councillor Fletcher?
In favor.
Councillor Bailão?
In favor.
Councillor McKelvey?
In favor.
Councillor Wong-Tam?
In favor.
That motion carries unanimously. The next motion is from Councillor Wong-Tam. All those in favor of the motion before you? Councillor Bradford?
In favor.
Councillor Perks?
In favor.
Councillor Fletcher?
In favor.
Councillor Bailão?
In favor.
Councillor McKelvey?
In favor.
Councillor Wong-Tam?
In favor.
And the item as amended. All those in favor? Councillor Bradford?
In favor.
Councillor Perks?
In favor?
Councillor Fletcher,
In favor?
Councillor Bailao,
In favor?
Councillor McKelvey,
In favor.
Councillor Wong Tam.
In favor.
The item carries unanimously.
Thank you, members. And the next item is item 12, creating new nonprofit cooperative homes at 685 Queen Street East. And we do have one speaker on this, Mark Richardson.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, first, councillors, thank you for working through lunch today to make sure we got to this agenda item. I am Mark Richardson from the HousingNowTO.com project. We would like to commend the Riverdale Cooperative and its partners at Streetcar Development for growing this affordable housing unit count of an existing site they own near both the Queen and King Street streetcar lines and the future Broadview TTC extension, which will go down to the East Harbor site on the Unilever lands. This is smart, transit-oriented development of new affordable housing capacity in an existing Toronto neighborhood. It's an excellent use of the proposed $4.8 million in Section 37 funds, and as such, it has our full support. However, there's always a however. As with many other sites from the city's open door program, we see the same recurring problem on the city side of the table, that the number of the affordable housing units proposed in the initial open doors approval by the city gets cut down by negotiation and approval processes with the city planning department. This is a fundamentally flawed practice, needs to be called out, and city planning staff need to be instructed that it has to end. Just over a year ago, in June 2019, your council approved PH 6.4 to provide new affordable rental housing at this site. You proposed to revitalize 9 units, add up to 23 additional accessible affordable rental units, but there was a proviso that through the development review process and community consultation, an appropriate built form will be reached, which will ultimately determine the number of affordable units. So that plan would have delivered 32 total units of new and renewed affordable housing. Today's proposal for the same site now only proposes the renovation of 9 units plus 17 units at the rear of the building for a total of 26 units. Somehow, during the city planning process, where they defined an quote unquote appropriate built form, it was apparently deemed appropriate to cut 6 new affordable housing units out of this project, a loss of 20% of the total affordable housing units that the city approved for this site 13 months ago. The for this loss of the Riverdale Cooperative units is unclear from the materials that are in front of us today, but it may be related to the heritage designation that was applied to the site in March 2016. Our HousingNowTO.com volunteers are going to go back, and we're going to add every year of Open Doors program into our free public interactive map. And we see this pattern repeating over and over, where City Council approves new or expanded affordable housing site at a very reasonable number of units, which is then cut by a significant number during the city planning consultation process. Today's example at 685 Queen Street East is 6 units, but at sites in Scarborough and Etobicoke, we see the loss of dozens of units from every single project. Council has almost unanimously agreed that Toronto is in a housing crisis and that affordable housing is your #1 priority. Respectfully, perhaps it is time that the city planning department and all of its subsections are instructed by council to ensure that the creation of new affordable housing units at speed and at scale takes priority over the other appropriate built form considerations that apparently remove 20% of the units from this open door site. For a simple example, today's report on this site has 7 pages. Last year's report had 6 pages, but the 2016 heritage report for this site has 28 pages. What are your staff doing with their time? Take some heritage planners and turn them into affordable housing planners. What would this site have been if you could have created, rather than a 5-story building on this site, a 7 to 10-story addition at the back of the building? We encourage planning and housing not to delay this proposal. Approve it as is because we're in a desperate need for new affordable units. But at the same time, we need to start having a transparent accounting of the site-specific unit loss that has occurred over the last 13 months within the City Hall processes. We gave the similar warning on the West Queen West Heritage Guidelines earlier this year, and this is the reason why. That's my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the speaker? Seeing none. Thanks, Mark. Questions of staff? Councillor Bradford?
Would staff like to comment on how there was the loss of units there? Based on the previous deputant's comments?
Through the chair.
Opportunity for clarification.
Yeah, through the chair, I guess I would invite my colleagues in planning to talk about how this particular proposal fits within the zoning bylaw as opposed to requiring a change. I can't comment on the specifics, but it seems that the original proposal was at 6 stories and the one that you're looking at today is at 5. And so that did drive the loss of units. Obviously, this project can proceed faster due to it being accommodated within the existing zoning bylaw, but I let planning comment on the built form criteria that was referred to.
Anybody from planning?
To do that if somebody can.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm seeing a number of city planning staff on. I'm presuming none are familiar with this specific file. We can certainly circle back with the appropriate planning personnel and provide a response afterwards. I don't know if Michael Mitzi or Carrie can speak to this at all.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Councillor?
Through you, Madam Chair.
Oh, there's Kyle.
Through you, Madam Chair. I don't have responsibility for this file at that time. At this time, I do have some familiarity with the past. And I think the quick, the short answer is that there was an openness amongst planning staff to consider a larger built form. However, that would have needed to be in the context of a rezoning process and not a minor variance. And that would involve both process risk and timing risk. And I believe the proponent considered that and opted for the route where they've ended up now.
It's proponent. It's a proponent's request. Sorry.
Are you done, Councillor Bradford, with your questions?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none. Speakers?
Asking a question now.
Councillor Fletcher?
The proponent is the co-op, correct?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
So this is their proposal.
That's
their
right,
proposal
yes.
that they've come to planning.
Yes.
And that they would prefer to proceed in this way so that the developer who's still on site can actually build this as well. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, that is the proposal that has been brought forward, yes. So I can't comment on the rationale about why the proponent chose that particular route. But yes, as has been indicated by planning, it may well have to do with process and timing.
Is the developer who is on that site working with Riverdale Co-op in order to accomplish this project?
Yes, through the chair, yes, that's correct.
And in that So that's correct. So they're only on site for a certain length of time. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
And should this go into a long rezoning, including a appeal, then that developer might be off site by that time. Am I correct?
Through the chair, yes, that may well be correct, and that may well have.
Yeah. In which case, the efficiencies and the pro forma would no longer hold.
Through the chair, I'm guessing, I haven't spoken to the proponent about that, but yes, those are common reasons why people decide to take a particular course of action due to speed, so that they can get a project done and not see any rises in construction costs.
So this keeps the construction costs low in order to accomplish this. And the original project, I don't know who can answer this, was to simply renovate the existing co-op units, of which there are 9, and now they will be completely rebuilt. So in some sense, the report isn't quite correct, because it's not a renovation of those units. They're completely brand new 23 units from top to bottom. There's no renovations. It'll be just the shell of the building and 9 brand new units within that building, including within the other 5 stories at the back.
Through the chair, yeah, it's a full replacement of those units plus the additional units at the back.
So it's not really, as the staff report says, or as Mr. Richardson, and I read it too, so it does give the impression that it's just a renovation rather than a full replacement.
That's correct. The work to those units is very extensive, yes.
Down to the shell.
That's correct.
Of the building. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Speakers? Councillor Fletcher.
I do have a motion. I've been going back and forth. As you know, it's not as easy online as it might be if we're all together in the same room, going back and forth with the committee of the clerk of our committee. And I'm wondering if I can see that there. That's it. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll just speak to that for a minute. That just has to do with some of the monies that are coming for this project are money that was dedicated to developing artist housing in the East End. And a whole number of times there have been requests when we're looking at new housing to build housing for the displaced artists in the East End, particularly those displaced out of the Carlaw corridor for rental housing, of which there isn't any more. And so this is one of the goals, longstanding goals of planning and housing in this area. So just to go back over some of these things, and I'm glad, thank you for your support for moving ahead for the Housing Now crew. But this one is a matter of whether or not we can accomplish this. This is a very modest project and always has been. 685 Queen is a co-op housing development that's there in a heritage building. So it truly is one of the heritage buildings on Queen Street. And more than likely some of that work was already done because we are still in the midst of a heritage conservation district in this section of Queen, which does have the preponderance of, for that small section, maybe the 1 kilometer section has more heritage buildings in it than probably any other section of Queen Street, east or west, or perhaps any other street in the city of Toronto. It's so rich. So this definitely does need to be preserved. Originally, they were just going to be renovated somewhat, but now everything is being brought up to accessibility. It's a major replacement of all of the 9 units and an additional 17. And it is a 5-story building. It will not be the, it will be able to hopefully be accomplished quickly. And the efficiencies there happen to be that this Section 37 comes from the Riverside Square development at Queen and Don Roadway, which is a streetcar development. They are going to be finishing up their own building on that site and have partnered with the co-op to ensure, and this also is keeping the cost lower, that they will be developing that on behalf of the co-op. And so realistically, they can't leave the site and then come back. The fact that they're on the site makes it possible to deliver this with a reasonable, get the maximum number of units for the cost that we have. And the whole thing is a $10 million price tag for all of this. And it's quite amazing to be able to accomplish this for this amount. So I don't want to miss this opportunity. And I'd like to thank the Riverdale Co-op for agreeing to go along with this. There were a number of sites, and I'll just correct you, Mr. Richardson, that there were a number of sites that were looked at here for this $5 million. And this was the one to which this was applied in the section, that I applied that in the section 37, to go here. To number one, and develop more co-op housing, which I think the city we don't do enough of that. We're simply behind in insisting that new units be co-op units, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. So I think we should all step up with that. And the Co-op Housing Federation says they're able to manage those even off-site units. East End is replete with one-off housing that are run by co-ops. So we should be maximizing co-op housing wherever we can. This does that. And I would like to thank Riverdale Co-op for getting on board with this early, and Co-op Housing Federation for helping accomplish this. And of course, the Housing Secretariat, Ms. Bond, and before her, Mr. Gadden, and all the very incredible staff that we have. So I'm looking forward to this going quickly, and we'll have all of these new units plus completely renovated co-op units on Queen Street. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers? Seeing none. Vote on Councillor Fletcher's motion. All those in favor? That carries. Item as amended. All those in favor? That carries. And our last item for today is item 13, extension to reconvey social housing at 444 Logan Avenue to the city. Oh, we did? Oh, I had a note here that Councillor Fletcher. Oh, she did. Okay, so that concludes the agenda for today, correct? Okay, members, thank you so much for your help and working through lunch. To all the staff, thank you. We'll see you soon. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, staff.
Madam Chair.